Tommy quickly removed his thick Carnford army coat to wrap the freezing Lex, then secured a cloak from a nearby cavalryman for the shivering Finn. As warmth returned to their bodies, the pair looked at Tommy with a mix of lingering trauma and profound gratitude. "Tommy, thank you," Lex stammered, his teeth chattering. "Save your strength," Tommy replied, then urgently asked, "Where are your families? And my mother and sister?" Lex's face clouded with worry. "They're still in the dungeon, locked up with us. I don't know how they are." Finn nodded anxiously. Tommy felt a surge of cold, sharp rage. He glared at John, who sat slumped and ashen-faced by the dirt mound under guard. His predatory gaze made the already broken John flinch and shrink back in terror. Tommy knelt before me, his voice trembling with fury. "My lord, my mother and sister, along with Lex and Finn's families, are still in John's dungeon. Please, let me rescue them." I looked at Tommy's flushed face and nodded calmly. "Go, Tommy. Take a few men. Ensure everyone's safety. If there is resistance, you know what to do." "Yes, my lord." Tommy took 4 cavalrymen, signaled for Lex and Finn to follow, and marched toward the dungeon entrance behind the village headman's residence. 2 village guard members stood at the entrance, looking bewildered. Seeing Tommy's group and the sight of Captain Hugo captured and John defeated, their resolve crumbled. One guard still attempted to block them. "Stop. This is a restricted area. No entry without the headman's permission." Tommy silenced him with a swift, brutal punch to the face. As the other guard reached for his blade, a cavalryman disarmed him with a heavy scabbard strike and kicked him to the ground. Both guards were left groaning and incapacitated. Ignoring them, Tommy grabbed the keys, kicked open the heavy, moldy door, and rushed into the dark, damp corridor. The air was thick with the stench of excrement and despair. Through the dim light, rows of crude, wooden-barred cells were visible. Hearing the commotion, the prisoners crowded the bars, whimpering in fear and anticipation. Tommy grabbed a torch and shouted, "Mother! Sarah! Where are you? Lex, Finn, find your families." "Brother? Is that you?" A tearful, familiar voice called out. Tommy rushed toward the sound, illuminating the cell. His mother, Anna, lay curled on the hay, her face swollen with a bloody lip, her eyes unfocused. Little Sarah clung to her, trembling, her dress marked with dirty boot prints. Seeing them, Tommy was consumed by a blinding, protective rage. He fumbled with the rusted lock, threw open the gate, and rushed inside. "Tommy, you're back." Anna's eyes focused, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to stand. Tommy pulled her into a tight embrace, his heart aching at her injuries. "Mother, you've suffered. I'm back. It's my fault you were dragged into this," he choked out. Sarah buried her face in his waist, sobbing, "Brother, the bad men hit Mother and kicked me. I was so scared." Tommy stroked her hair, checking for serious injuries. Though she seemed physically intact, his hatred for John reached a boiling point. He suppressed the urge to kill John immediately, prioritizing his family's safety. "It's over, Mother Sarah. I am here to save us. No one will ever bully you again," he whispered, helping them up. Nearby, Lex and Finn were also reuniting with their families amidst tears and relief. Lex's father, Hansen, leaned on his son, coughing, while the others wept with joy, their faces marked by the trauma of their imprisonment. "Is everyone okay? Those who can walk, follow me. The rest, my brothers will help," Tommy declared. With the cavalryman's assistance, the prisoners were brought out into the cold, free air, many weeping with relief. Escorted by the cavalry, Tommy and the others returned to the village square. The scene had transformed. John, Edward, the wounded Hugo, and their henchmen were now bound and kneeling in the center of the square. They were positioned exactly where Lex and Finn had been tied, the wooden frames standing as a silent irony. The villagers watched in silence, their expressions shifting from fear to awe and anticipation. Seeing John, Tommy's rage flared anew. After seating his mother and sister on a bench, he knelt before me, his voice raspy with suppressed fury. "My lord, my mother was struck, and my 8-year-old sister was kicked by these animals. It was all John's doing. Please, my lord, grant me permission to execute this beast myself and avenge my family." I looked down at the grieving Tommy, then at the injured Anna and Sarah, my eyes flashing with cold intent. I shook my head slowly. Wait, Tommy. Tommy looked up, confused. My gaze swept over the kneeling prisoners and the ragged villagers. I understand your rage, Tommy. But tell me. I raised my voice so all could hear. Do you think only your family, or Lex and Finn's families, have suffered under John and his cronies? I pointed to the gaunt, numb villagers. Look at them. How many have been forced into excessive labor in silence? How many daughters have been harassed? How many families lost their food or were sold into slavery for debt? How many were discarded like Hansen when they grew old or injured? How many signed their lives away like Finn, only to starve? My words stirred long-buried pain in the villagers. Their numb eyes ignited with fury, and their trembling lips betrayed deep-seated hatred toward John and his cohorts. Private vengeance is not enough. Justice must be served. My voice boomed. John has committed countless crimes. If you kill him now, it is merely a private lynching, not justice. What of his other sins? What of the suffering he inflicted on all of Gallon Village? Shall those vanish with his death? Tommy's rage cooled, replaced by a deeper realization. He understood. I wasn't denying him revenge, but demanding a more thorough, public, and legitimate reckoning. They needed to strip John of his power, expose his shame, and shatter the cycle of fear that had long paralyzed the village. This is not an execution, I encouraged, but a public trial. Every victim must step forward and voice their grievances. Expose John's true, ugly nature under the light of day. Only then will we deliver the punishment he and his accomplices deserve, in the name of the law. Tommy nodded, his anger now tempered by a firm, disciplined resolve. This was about destroying John's authority and inciting the villagers' long-suppressed resistance. By participating in the trial and hearing the testimonies of others, the villagers would finally break free from the old order. As the architect of this justice, I would earn their genuine gratitude and loyalty. Once the trial concluded, convincing them to move to Conford, a place of hope, free from John, would be far easier than mere promises. Understood, my lord. Tommy bowed. Please, preside over this trial. Let the village see their true end. I turned to the agitated crowd. People of Gallon Village, now is your chance. If John, Edward, Hugo, or their lackeys have harmed you, step forward and speak. I, Karl von Schmidt, Prince Consort and Guardian of the North, guarantee your safety. Today, we settle old scores and restore justice to Gallon Village. A public trial of a village head was unheard of. To the villagers, masters were inherently superior, and their abuse was often seen as an inescapable fate. They were used to suffering in silence, never dreaming of a day where they could demand justice from their oppressors. This upended their entire world order, leaving the square in a stunned, heavy silence. They exchanged glances, caught between disbelief, fear, and a flickering spark of hope. They stared at the cowering John and his men, then at the calm, authoritative me, caught in an internal struggle. If they spoke and I left, would John's retaliation destroy their families? Yet, seeing the cavalry's decisive action and the imperial decree, they sensed that this time, things were truly different. The imperial decree held a magical, overwhelming authority that transcended local tyranny. Whispers spread like grass in the wind. Can we really speak? He doesn't look like he's lying. But it's John. He crippled my father. He stole my land. My daughter. The voices were timid. The courage to be the first was the hardest to summon. Amidst the suffocating silence, a trembling, tear-choked voice finally pierced the air. My lord. I want to report. I report that beast, John. All eyes snapped toward the speaker. A ragged, hunched woman emerged from the crowd, clutching a disheveled, terrified girl of about 10. The woman looked 20 years older than her age, her eyes burning with a mix of grief, hatred, and desperate resolve. She dragged her daughter 10 paces before my horse and collapsed, slamming her forehead against the frozen earth. The girl knelt beside her, trembling uncontrollably. Looking up, the woman pointed at the pale John. My lord, you must seek justice for me. My husband, Andrew, was the village's best carpenter and honest man. 3 years ago, John coveted his skill and forced him to build furniture for his house without paying a single copper coin. My husband begged him to pay at least for the materials, but it only enraged that demon. The woman broke down, sobbing. He had my husband tied to the old locust tree at the village entrance and whipped him with salt-soaked leather day and night. I knelt and begged until my head bled, but he wouldn't stop. He pulled me aside and sneered. If I served him for a night, he would spare my husband. In my desperation, I was defiled. The crowd erupted in gasps and curses. Men clenched their fists, eyes blazing. But the liar, the devil, he broke his word and continued to whip my husband. After a day and a night, my husband was whipped to death on that tree. He didn't even let me collect the body for 3 days. The girl buried her face in her mother's chest, whimpering. My eldest daughter, only 14 then, witnessed her father's death and went insane. She's never been the same. And my 12-year-old daughter, he dragged her away and sold her to human traffickers headed south. I haven't heard from her in 5 years. She knocked her head again, blood staining the ground. I've lived like a stray dog, waiting for someone to hold him accountable. Today, I've finally waited. My lord, I beg you. I want him dead. I want him to pay for my husband and daughter with his life. Her harrowing cry echoed through the square, leaving the villagers shaken, their eyes red with fury and grief. Even the battle-hardened Conford cavalrymen looked on with indignation, hands resting on their hilts. My expression remained icy as I swept my gaze over the ashen-faced John, then signaled Tommy, "Help her up and record this." Tommy, suppressing his rage, carefully helped the exhausted woman aside and solemnly recorded her testimony. I turned to the crowd, my voice steady and encouraging. "You heard her. This is no isolated case. John's crimes here are countless. This lady had the courage to speak out. Who else has suffered? Do not be afraid. With me, the king's decree, and justice on your side, no one can hide the truth anymore. Speak your grievances." The first testimony acted as a crack in a dam, releasing a flood of long-suppressed fear and silence. One by one, villagers stepped forward, their faces etched with grief and newfound courage, kneeling before me or pointing accusing fingers at John, Edward, and Hugo. An elderly man wept, recounting how his son was crippled by John's thugs for picking a few stray wheat stalks, leading to his family's ruin. A middle-aged man roared at Edward, accusing him of using forged debt documents to seize his ancestral land, an act that led to his father's death. A young woman sobbed as she described how Hugo had extorted her and threatened her family after she had already paid her taxes. The accusations poured in: land theft, usury, forced labor, assault, and corruption. John was the mastermind, Edward the accomplice, and Hugo the enforcer. Each claim represented a family destroyed by blood, tears, and despair. The square became a chorus of lamentation and righteous fury against the old regime. Tommy and 2 literate soldiers frantically filled page after page with testimonies. I sat motionless on my horse, listening intently and occasionally pressing for details. My presence gave the victims courage and left the accused trembling, unable to offer any defense under my cold, piercing gaze. Eventually, the testimonies subsided as the villagers' emotions reached a temporary peak and the record grew thick. A sense of catharsis and collective excitement filled the square as villagers shared their pain and the realization of their shared victory. I signaled for a pause, rode toward the terrified John, and stared down at him like a blade of ice. "John," I said, my voice heavy with authority, "you heard every word. Do you confess?" John, though trembling, attempted one final desperate defense. He stammered, citing his status as the village chief appointed by the kingdom, claiming the villagers were lying and that judging him was unprecedented and illegal. "A village chief?" I sneered, my voice ringing out clearly. "A fine appointment indeed." I straightened, my voice booming like thunder. "John, listen well. I am Karl von Schmidt, the prince consort and guardian of the North. The king granted you power to protect the people and foster prosperity, not to act as a local tyrant. You were not meant to use your office to commit crimes, murder, or oppress the innocent." I gestured to the villagers. "Look at them. These commoners are the foundation of the kingdom. They provide the taxes that sustain the state. You treated the king's subjects as slaves and his authority as a tool for your own greed. You are no chief. You are a parasite, a tyrant, and a criminal deserving of death." My words elevated the local justice to a matter of upholding the kingdom's law and the king's benevolence. I effectively dismantled John's defense, leaving him no room to hide behind his title or custom. John was left speechless, utterly defeated by the righteous rebuke. His psychological defenses crumbled, and he nearly collapsed. He realized that before this young prince consort, who held the king's mandate, military might, and the people's support, his power was meaningless. He was finished, and Edward and Hugo looked on in total despair. I turned to the crowd. The evidence is mountain high. John, Edward, Hugo, and their cohorts are guilty of crimes intolerable to heaven and law. As guardian of the North, I sentence John, Edward, and Hugo to immediate execution. The rest will be punished according to the law, and all stolen property shall be recovered. The square erupted in thunderous cheers and cries of support. Many wept with gratitude, kneeling to thank me, and I ignored the broken men on the ground. With the public sentiment at its peak, any delay would weaken the impact of this judgment. I needed a swift, decisive end. I ordered the cavalry captain, execute them. 2 Conford cavalrymen, expert marksmen, stepped forward. Without dismounting, they drew their bows, aiming steady arrows at the hearts of John and Edward. There was no need for further words. For such widely condemned criminals, a swift execution was the most powerful deterrent. 2 sharp, piercing sounds cut through the air. The arrows struck true, burying themselves deep into the chests of John and Edward. The force threw them backward, and they collapsed to the ground, dead. John died with eyes wide in disbelief, unable to fathom falling to a young noble's arrow. Edward collapsed instantly, gasping for air before falling silent. Dark blood pooled on the cold earth beneath them. A brief silence followed. Then, the square erupted in a deafening roar of relief, vengeance, and catharsis. They're dead. Justice is served. Long live the prince consort. The crowd surged, weeping and cheering, finally venting years of suppressed hatred. The victims who had testified knelt, bowing to me in tearful gratitude. The bloody execution served as undeniable proof that justice had been restored. My decisiveness cemented my authority as a divine arbiter. As the cheers continued, 2 cavalrymen dragged the terrified, trembling Hugo toward the execution spot. Hugo broke down, wailing and begging for mercy, abandoning all pretense of his former authority. I was forced. It was John and Edward's doing. I'll give you everything I own, just spare me. His pathetic pleas were drowned out by the cold, vengeful cheers of the villagers. His desperate begging only disgusted the onlookers. I remained unmoved. Hugo's crimes were clear, and his pleas changed nothing. I needed to purge the old order entirely, not show mercy that could invite future trouble. Another arrow flew. Hugo fell, his pleas silenced forever. The crowd's cheers reached a new, thunderous peak. As the adrenaline faded, the reality of their situation set in. A sense of profound emptiness and uncertainty replaced the initial euphoria. The villagers looked to me, their eyes filled with dependency and confusion. The tyrants were dead, but their land remained barren, their homes ruined, and their future uncertain. They had been granted freedom, but without their former masters, they felt adrift and anxious. They stared at me, waiting for my guidance as if I were their only light. I recognized this moment as the perfect opportunity to establish a new order. I spoke clearly. People of Gallen Village, justice is served. As Prince Consort and Guardian of the North, I declare, all unjust contracts and debts are abolished. You are no longer serfs or debt slaves. You are free citizens of the kingdom. The word freedom now carried real weight. Yet, they needed a path forward. A villager asked tremulously, Lord, we are free, but what now? Who will farm the land? Who do we pay? Another added, is your territory, Conford, as good as Tommy says? Can we go there? This was the hope everyone shared. Conford represented their only escape from poverty. I smiled encouragingly and pointed north. Of course, Conford welcomes all who are willing to work. We are rebuilding and need hands for farming, labor, and the military. There is food, clothing, and hope for all. I gestured for Tommy to explain the details, knowing they would trust one of their own. Tommy stepped forward, clearly outlining the recruitment policies. The Lord's Manor would provide rations during the transition and allocate land based on family size. Rations would continue until the first harvest, with special incentives for craftsmen and soldiers. The promise of land and security captivated them. Coming from Tommy, after I had proven my power and justice, the offer was seen as absolute truth. They no longer doubted the prince consort's sincerity. Real, tangible hope finally dispelled their fear. The crowd cheered again, this time with gratitude and anticipation. To Confort, long live the prince consort. Villagers rushed home to pack their meager belongings and prepare for the journey. The square emptied, leaving only me and my cavalry. I ordered Tommy to seize the assets of the deceased tyrants, grain, deeds, and ledgers, to be transported to our camp outside France City. I warned, only take their ill-gotten gains. Do not harm their families. Keep them under guard for now. Be swift and clean. Understood, my lord. Tommy replied, eager to execute the task. Seizing these assets would fund Confort and ensure the tyrants could never return to power. I nodded as Tommy led a group of villagers to secure the properties. The situation in Gallon Village was settled. The transition would be handled by Tommy. Watching the goods being loaded, I felt the fire of my new role as an arbiter and liberator burning brighter. Since I had already broken the old order, why not expand my influence further? As Tommy returned, I asked, Tommy, you know these lands. Tell me, where else are people suffering under leeches like John? Tommy recalled his time at the Blackwater River iron mines with deep hatred. He told me that Sir Sonny, the local lord, ran the mines like a Hell's Cape 30 miles east. Tommy described the brutal conditions, unpaid labor, constant beatings, and serfs living worse than livestock. My eyes turned cold at the mention of Sir Sonny. I immediately mobilized 10 of my most elite, battle-hardened cavalrymen from Confort. Without waiting for supplies, the 10 riders galloped toward the Blackwater River mines. For 2 days, my small unit moved through the southern France City region with ruthless efficiency. They raided Sir Sonny's mines, catching the guards completely off guard. Most guards surrendered immediately upon seeing the disciplined cavalry. A few loyalists who resisted were swiftly cut down by me. I found the miners in wretched, subhuman conditions, their eyes hollow with despair. I seized the manager's funds and distributed double the owed wages to every worker. The coins shocked the miners, who had long forgotten the concept of payment. I abolished their debts and offered them freedom and land in Confort. The miners were ecstatic, immediately pledging their loyalty to their liberator. The freed serfs joined the northward march, and I claimed the mine's resources as spoils of war. I continued my momentum. Using intelligence from the miners, I raided 2 more of Sonny's villages and 2 neighboring estates known for exploitation. At each site, I held public trials, executed or exiled the oppressors, and organized the liberation and migration of the serfs. My speed left local authorities paralyzed. Threatened by the loss of their privileges, Sir Sonny and other nobles united in a panic. A knight gathered 30 armed retainers to ambush me on the road. They severely underestimated my combat prowess. I didn't bother with tactics. I led my 10 riders in a direct wedge formation charge. The veterans of Confort tore through the disorganized retainers like tigers among sheep. The defensive line collapsed instantly, with the retainers fleeing in terror. The knight was captured within 3 exchanges. The skirmish had a profound impact. It proved that local noble forces were no match for my unit. Any further thoughts of armed resistance were crushed. I held the moral high ground and ignored their legal protests. Desperate, the nobles appealed to Count Rochefort, the governor of the north. Letters accusing me of inciting rebellion and looting flooded the governor's mansion. The count initially remained silent, seemingly allowing the chaos to unfold. However, as the fire of judgment threatened regional stability, the count finally intervened. A messenger arrived with an absolute order for me. The order commanded me to stop my patrols and return to Confort to prepare for my wedding to Princess Louise. The directive extinguished my campaign. Knowing I could not defy the count, I accepted the boundary. I ordered my men to turn back, gathering the massive caravan of migrants for the return to Confort. The judgment of I, which had shaken the southern region, concluded. It left behind noble resentment, thousands of new citizens for Confort, and a name that now struck fear and hope into the north. Over 20,000 people had gathered at the camp outside France City. Standing on a hill, I felt the weight of my responsibility. I knew these people were the lifeblood needed to rebuild Confort. Before leaving, I visited Count Rockefort one last time. I was led to the Count's office, where the Count set aside his pen to receive me. I reported that the recruitment was a success, providing the foundation for Confort's future. The Count acknowledged my success, but warned that direct support from France City would now diminish. His tone was both approving and final. I vowed to succeed for the sake of my people and the Count's support. I added, almost in a whisper, that I also did it for Charlotte. The mention of Charlotte created a heavy silence between them. The atmosphere in the room shifted from professional to deeply somber. The Count looked away, his fingers tracing the desk, while I lowered my gaze. After a long silence, the Count sighed, promising to let her know of my devotion. He expressed a father's weary hope that I would keep my promise, despite the difficult circumstances ahead. Count Rockefort stared sharply at me. The princess is heading north to live by your side. As a father, I have one request. You must agree to it. I tensed. Please speak. The Count said slowly. Do not have children with the princess. I was stunned. I had braced myself for a demand of absolute fidelity to Charlotte, even if my marriage to the princess was merely nominal. I had already resolved to endure any hardship to keep my promise to Charlotte. Yet, the Count's demand was chillingly pragmatic. It implied that physical intimacy with the princess was acceptable, provided no royal heir was produced. A wave of humiliation and confusion washed over me. Charlotte was the Count's daughter. How could he suggest I betray her? This contradicted the Count's image as a loving father. Seeing my shock, the Count offered a bitter smile. Surprised? Do you find this request too cold? Of course I am. I retorted, my voice rising. I will never betray Charlotte. I love her, and that will never change. I don't understand this demand. The Count looked at me with weary relief. Carl, that you feel this way is good. As her father, I am glad. His expression turned grave. But remember my words. This is not a game, nor a slight against your feelings. He leaned in, whispering, an heir with pure royal blood is a shackle. It would bind you, Confort, and Charlotte's future to the Plantagenet royal chariot forever. There would be no turning back, it would be total ruin. Conversely, the Count noted with political cunning, without an heir, your marriage to Princess Louise remains a mere political alliance. As you grow stronger, the Queen Mother in the royal capital will be less wary without a shared interest between you and the princess. This buys Confort time and space to develop. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think rationally. The Count was speaking from cold, political necessity. An heir would combine the blood of King Heinrich with my military power, inviting the suspicion of Queen Mother Katerina and certain destruction. Having no children was a strategic shield for Confort's rise. I nodded. I understand, Count. Your logic is sound. I accept your request, but I must say, you underestimate my love for Charlotte. My loyalty to her is not political, it is from the heart. The Count looked at me deeply. Just remember your promise. Go. I bowed and left the office, the door closing behind me. The Count sat alone, staring at the empty doorway, haunted by my youthful, stubborn back. He felt no relief, only deepening anxiety. Carl, he whispered, I hope you can truly keep your word. He was skeptical. He knew how power, beauty, and proximity could change a man. Could I really remain unmoved by the young, beautiful Princess Louise? The Count doubted it. But he had no choice. His daughter had fallen for a man destined for the political whirlpool. I only fear for Charlotte and the child. He sighed into the silence. At dawn, the camp outside France City's south gate was finishing its departure. Tents were dismantled and supplies packed. Refugees, tenants, and miners gathered, their faces a mix of anxiety and hope. Anna and Sarah were settled into sturdy, makeshift wagons. These wagons were repurposed from the ones used to transport Solon's head to the Count, pulled by battle-hardened northern horses. The caravan began its long journey north toward Confort. Anna felt the rhythmic vibration of the wagon, her mind drifting to the past. As a girl, her family had owned a wagon. Her father was a prosperous farmer, and the wagon was their pride for transporting grain. She remembered the feeling of stability and wealth as she watched the fields pass by. But as royal taxes mounted, their life crumbled. The wagon and land were sold. Her brother became a laborer, and she was married off to Tommy's father to ease the family burden. Life was poor but hopeful, thanks to her hard-working husband. Then he died, leaving her to struggle alone with young Tommy and Sarah. Anna sighed, then looked at the young man riding a gentle horse beside the wagon. It was her son, Tommy. His wounds were bandaged, and thanks to the Lord's militia potion, he had recovered his strength. He sat tall, wearing the short sword of a Confort soldier, his eyes scanning the column to maintain order. To Anna, her son had never looked more heroic. The suffering seemed to be over. Her son had found his path, and their family was finally moving toward a hopeful future. Sarah, meanwhile, was simply filled with wonder at her first wagon ride. Sarah touched the rough carriage floor and peeked at the horses, her face glowing with excitement. She hummed a tune, cheering up the other children and bringing a relieved smile to Anna's face. Tommy rode closer to the carriage and asked, "Mother, are you and Sarah comfortable? Is the road too bumpy?" Anna smiled at her son, shaking her head. "We're fine. Having a carriage is much better than walking." She looked at the winding procession and asked, "How much further to Confort?" "2 more days, if all goes well," Tommy replied with a nod. Sarah leaned out, eyes bright. "Brother, riding a horse looks fun. Can I try?" Tommy chuckled indulgently. "Sure, when we stop for a break. I'll take you for a short ride." "Really?" "Yay." Sarah clapped, her laughter ringing through the air. Seeing his mother and sister's joy, Tommy felt a surge of responsibility and satisfaction. He nudged his horse and returned to his position, continuing his duties as a Confort soldier. 2 days later, I and my troops crested the final ridge toward Confort, stunned by the sight before them. The area around the castle, once open farmland and forest, had vanished. It was now covered in a chaotic sprawl of shanties made of branches, rags, and mud. Thousands of shacks formed a gray-brown carpet, connected by a network of muddy, trampled paths. The air was thick with the stench of livestock, smoke, and overcrowding. The noise was deafening, a mix of crying children, shouting adults, and braying animals. Nearby hills had been stripped bare of trees to provide materials and fuel for the shanty town. "What is this?" I muttered, shocked. Leon, the captain, rode up, looking grim. "My lord, there are too many people. They've surrounded the barracks." "Let's get to the castle," I ordered. The cavalry struggled to navigate the dense, crowded shanty town. The refugees watched with a mix of awe and hope, slowly parting to let the soldiers pass. Leon and his men had to shout constantly to keep their horses from trampling anyone. Upon reaching the castle, I found even the outer grounds occupied by makeshift shelters. Guards were struggling to maintain order amidst the chaos. I left the troops to Leon and headed straight for Edgar's office in the Lord's Hall. Edgar was buried in maps and ledgers, looking disheveled, exhausted, and anxious. "Edgar," I called out. Edgar jumped up, looking desperate. "My lord, you're back. I was about to send for you. What is happening? You said you'd bring some refugees, but not this many." He pointed to his records, hands shaking. "There are at least 27,000 people here, and more are coming. Our original population was only 5,000. This is 5 times that amount." Edgar sighed bitterly. "The castle and stables are full. We have no choice but to let them build shanties outside. They've cut down all the nearby woods. Food, water, and sanitation are failing. We can't sustain this." I smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, Edgar. I was so focused on growing Confort that I didn't consider the logistics. It's my fault." My tone turned firm. "But I have solved the funding issue. Once the money arrives, we must work together to settle these people." I gestured to the shanty town. "These miners and craftsmen trusted us. They left their lives for a future in Confort. If we break our promises, we lose their trust. We cannot allow that." Edgar relaxed slightly. "I've already categorized the skilled workers. We have 1,000 craftsmen and 3,000 experienced laborers. With funding, we can start building housing and infrastructure immediately. But food is the immediate crisis. Prices in France City have spiked due to the influx. Rye prices have doubled. Even with the Count's discount, our 3,000 gold coins won't feed 23,000 people for a month." I smiled confidently. "A month is enough. The money will arrive soon." Edgar nodded, then added, "Merchants have arrived, sensing opportunity. They've set up their own camp. They have goods we need. They've requested an audience. Should I summon them? Let them wait, I replied. We need to align our own plans first. Call a meeting. Edgar left to organize. Half an hour later, the Lord's Hall was full. I began without pleasantries. This concerns the future of Conford, I said, placing an imperial decree with a royal seal on the table. The first piece of news. King Sigmund has decreed that his sister, Princess Louise, shall marry me, in recognition of our victory against the Solon army. The hall fell into absolute silence. Shock turned to euphoria. I was to be a prince consort. Conford's status had changed forever, and with it, the future of everyone in the room. Despite the joy, Edgar and Brendan felt a flicker of worry regarding Count Rockefeller's daughter, Charlotte, and her unspoken bond with me. They wondered how this royal marriage would affect that relationship, but my calm, detached demeanor eased their concerns. I appeared unbothered, likely viewing the marriage as a strategic opportunity for Conford's development. I addressed the room. This marriage is the king's grace and a great honor for Conford. It brings political capital and attention, but also greater responsibility. I shifted to the immediate challenge, feeding and housing 23,000 refugees. I asked Edgar to report on their resource and financial constraints. Edgar reported the severe food and fund shortages, casting a heavy mood over the meeting. I turned to the construction lead, Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, we must solve the housing issue. Long-term living in shacks is unacceptable for health and morale. I promised them proper shelter, and as their lord, I cannot break my word. Mr. Moore replied, I understand, but our current supplies and manpower make large-scale construction extremely difficult. I nodded, anticipating this. Because it is difficult, we need a new approach. I have a concept for securing our presence on the plains, the Tunbeo. I began sketching on paper. A Tunbeo is a square, walled settlement, roughly 500 to 600 meters in perimeter, enclosing 20,000 to 30,000 square meters. The walls don't need to be massive like our main castle. 1 meter thick and 5 to 6 meters high suffice. Their purpose is to delay enemies and provide basic shelter. I detailed the design. No wide walkways, but arrow towers at the corners and key points for crossfire. The walls will have dense firing ports for bows or muskets. A single, heavily guarded gate will control access. I added internal details. The interior is a planned community. Homes, warehouses, workshops, a tavern, a chapel, and a barracks are integrated. We need orderly streets, public squares, and emergency water sources. Surrounding farmland is worked during the day. By dusk, everyone returns inside, and the gate is locked, guarded by the local militia. This allows us to resist small raids and hold out until reinforcements arrive from the main castle. This is how we safely take root on the plains. Mr. Moore stared at the sketch, eyes wide with excitement. He leaned forward, tracing the lines with his finger. Brilliant, my lord. It perfectly solves the problem of settling on open plains. It integrates living, production, and defense into a miniature, self-sustaining fortress. The cost is far lower than a full castle, yet it offers superior protection compared to a village. If we build a network of these, our defensive depth and agricultural capacity will skyrocket. It's a stroke of genius. Mr. Moore stood up, eager to begin planning, site selection, and budgeting. I ordered Edgar and Mr. Moore to build the first Tunbeo, sized for 500 to 700 households, 1,500 to 3,000 people. Each Tunbeo will have a 300-man militia battalion, composed of locals who farm during peace and defend during war. Prioritize our original subjects for housing. They are our foundation and deserve to see their loyalty rewarded. For the refugees, we will implement a work-for-relief system. They must work on construction, road building, and land reclamation to earn food and housing. Edgar agreed, noting it was the perfect time for such projects. We can organize the refugees to clear land immediately to catch the spring planting season. Otherwise, we face a food crisis in autumn. Edgar proposed, new land should go to our original subjects first to fulfill our promise and reduce our supply burden. For refugees, we can use a work point system to track their contributions, granting them priority for future land or housing. I approved. Excellent. Implement the work point system based on merit. I turned to Brendan and the military staff. The militia is settled, but we must also expand our main combat soldier corps. However, our current finances cannot support large-scale recruitment. We must be precise. Many refugees are soldiers scattered from previous wars. They have combat experience and potential for leadership. I ordered, Brendan, you are in charge. Screen the refugees for those with military backgrounds and assess their skills for our ranks. For those with specialized skills, bypass standard training and integrate them directly into our main legion to bolster our combat effectiveness. Brendan nodded sharply. Understood, my lord. I'll personally lead a team to select these veterans. We need experienced soldiers, not raw recruits. Good, I concluded. Housing, food, and military, these are our foundations. Everyone, get to work. Conford's future depends on our actions. The meeting ended with a clear sense of urgency and purpose. As the room cleared, I stopped Edgar, my chief steward, from leaving. Edgar, wait. There's a matter requiring your special attention. Edgar turned respectfully. My lord, please command. It concerns that young man, Tommy. Edgar recalled. The soldier who performed well during the refugee recruitment and the incident at Gallon Village. Exactly, I confirmed. His courage, resilience, and organizational skills during our southern mission were exceptional. He was instrumental in bringing those refugees back. I detailed Tommy's background. He had secretly mobilized his hometown of Gallon Village with impressive persuasion and planning. His plan leaked, leading to the arrest and torture of his mother, sister, and friends. He barely escaped with his life. Despite his injuries and the uncertainty of his family's fate, he didn't break. He traveled to France City to report to me. During the subsequent rescue and relocation, his leadership helped us save his family and bring a large group of oppressed villagers to safety. Such composure and organizational talent are rare among common soldiers. I continued. Keeping him as a mere soldier or even a future non-commissioned officer is a waste. A developing territory needs leaders who can unite people, not just warriors. Edgar grasped the intent. You want to move him from the military to civil administration? Yes. His ability to connect with the masses and gain their trust is exactly what Conford needs right now. We need to show the world what Conford is to attract more people, and we need to foster a sense of belonging among those already here. I want you to establish a new department, the Department of Culture and Propaganda, or simply the Publicity Office. Its goal is authentic, targeted outreach. We must broadcast our defense of our home, our fair laws, and our land distribution policies through word of mouth and simple pamphlets. Eventually, we should set up liaison points in France City to attract refugees, craftsmen, and merchants. Internally, we must strengthen the identity of the Conford people, organize regular assemblies to share policies and hero stories, and post informative notices on laws, hygiene, and farming in our Tunbeo. We can even turn our policies into songs or stories to make them accessible to everyone. Long-term, this department will oversee basic education, setting up literacy classes in our Tunbeo during the off-season. Even basic literacy and numeracy will immensely benefit our administration and future industry. I want Tommy to be a core member, perhaps even a future leader, of this department. He's young, driven, and his own story is persuasive. This role utilizes his strengths while keeping him off the front lines. It also provides a stable future for his mother and sister. My plan balanced territorial needs with genuine care for my subordinates. Edgar listened intently. He recognized the strategic brilliance, placing talent where it's best used while building a cultural foundation for the territory. It was a multifaceted move to consolidate power, attract population, and reward loyalty. A brilliant plan, my lord. This will open a vital new avenue for our governance. I will draft the structure, budget, and charter immediately and speak with Tommy about his transition. Excellent, I said. One more thing regarding labor allocation. With the construction of our first Tunbeo, we will need builders, loggers, stonecutters, and shop assistants. You must prioritize these jobs for the newly arrived refugees, especially those with families. This ensures they can earn a living, feed their families, and quickly develop a sense of belonging and dependency on Conford. To stabilize the new population, we must prioritize their livelihoods. Old subjects already have established farmland and agricultural foundations. We should encourage them to boost income through side businesses like animal husbandry or handicrafts, or by intensifying their farming to increase yields. We cannot let them monopolize all new non-agricultural jobs. Reserving opportunities for newcomers is essential for long-term social integration and harmony. Edgar, the chief administrator, immediately grasped the policy's intent to foster integration and stability. While acknowledging the policy's brilliance, Edgar warned of potential backlash. The old subjects who supported you from the start may feel marginalized and resentful if newcomers are prioritized. They will feel it is unfair that those who bled for you are now being passed over for outsiders. I remained cold and resolute. Even if there is resentment, it must be done for the sake of Conford's long-term stability. We can appease the old subjects with tax breaks or educational opportunities, but the employment principle remains non-negotiable. I lowered my voice. However, Edgar, I cannot issue this order in my own name. Edgar understood the implication instantly. This biased policy would inevitably trigger criticism from those with vested interests. As the leader, I must maintain an image of impartiality to unite the territory, avoiding the appearance of favoritism. I needed someone to shoulder the villainous reputation of enforcing this policy. I understand, my lord, Edgar replied, his eyes reflecting his willingness to take the burden. Having served me for years, he knew his role was to handle the necessary but unglamorous tasks that might invite controversy. I will issue the directive as chief administrator, citing development needs, and handle all explanations and supervision myself. I will face the criticism and questioning. You need only focus on the broader direction. He was ready to act as a firewall, shielding the Lord from direct dissatisfaction. This was his duty and his loyalty. I looked at the man who had become the administrative backbone of Conford. I patted Edgar's shoulder. No flowery words were needed. The gesture conveyed everything. It was a silent pact of trust between a lord and his most loyal minister. Do it, I said calmly. I turned and left the meeting room, leaving the heavy administrative burdens to Edgar. Watching my retreating figure, Edgar felt a mix of pride and melancholy. Young Master Carl has changed. He is becoming as decisive and calculating as the Duke. I soon met with the visiting merchant caravan leaders in the Lord's Hall. They were shrewd men who quickly pushed one representative forward. The representative was a plump, well-dressed middle-aged man. He wore a polite, respectful smile. Lord Carl, I am Grimm from the royal capital. While in France City, I heard of your legendary achievements in the Northern Territory from Count Rochefort. On behalf of the United Chamber of Commerce, I offer my highest respects for your heroic defense of the North. I remained unmoved by the flattery. My focus was on the name Grimm, which I recognized from my intelligence system. Grimm was an influential merchant whose wife, Lady Isla, was a well-known mistress of Count Rochefort. Intrigued, I decided to test the man. As Grimm began his pitch, I interrupted with a casual smile. Mr. Grimm, I appreciate the sentiment. But first, a personal question. How is your wife, Lady Isla? Grimm's professional smile froze instantly. He was stunned and panicked. How did this northern lord know his wife? He stammered. She is well? Thank you. But if I may ask, how do you know her? He scrambled to find an explanation. I leaned back, feigning nostalgia. I met her at a banquet hosted by Count Rochefort a year ago. She was quite impressive. I even gifted her a silver bracelet with a siren's tear pearl. I wonder if she still has it. The revelation hit Grimm like a thunderbolt. His wife did indeed own such a bracelet. He had previously assumed it was a gift from the Count, which he thought helped his business. Realizing it was actually from me, Grimm's shock turned into wild, opportunistic joy. His wife had connections to both the powerful Count and this rising northern star. He interpreted my mention of the gift as a calculated gesture of goodwill. Grimm's smile became genuine and eager. Ah, that gift. I had forgotten the source. Allah loves that bracelet and wears it often. What a remarkable coincidence that you two share such a connection. I calculated that this accidental connection would smooth the upcoming negotiations and secure better terms. I noted that Count Rochefort was not only a warrior, but also a master of social maneuvering. Grimm bowed again, feigning gratitude. Thank you for your kindness, my lord. I will remember this favor and bring her to reunite with you next time. I observed Grimm's reaction, understanding his true nature. Smiling, I steered the conversation back to business, a small gesture. Mr. Grimm, shall we discuss your investment plans for Conford? Of course, business first. Grimm replied, adopting a pragmatic tone. Conford has suffered great losses despite its victory and needs rebuilding. Our Chamber of Commerce wishes to help stabilize the northern frontier and support your reconstruction. I maintained a polite smile, though I was amused. Merchants were driven by profit. This talk of supporting defense was merely a facade. Playing along, I asked with feigned gratitude, I appreciate your intent. How exactly do you plan to assist? Encouraged, Grimm proposed. Conford urgently needs grain, cloth, iron, and salt, the lifeblood of your territory. We offer to establish shops in Conford, supplying these goods at prices lower than the inner pass market to ease your burden. Grimm spoke with practiced sincerity. I nodded, seemingly considering the generous offer. Internally, I scoffed. Merchants never operate at a loss. I saw through their scheme instantly. Grain, iron, and salt were strategic resources that any lord must control. Grimm was targeting the very sectors where Conford was most vulnerable. This was an aid. It was an attempt to monopolize the market by using low prices as bait. I knew that once they established a foothold, they would crush local competition. Once they held a monopoly, they would dictate prices, holding Conford's survival hostage. Eventually, they would use this leverage to demand tax exemptions or political influence. It was an economic shackle disguised as a gift. I kept my expression warm. I tapped my chair, asking, your offer is generous, but how long can these low prices be maintained? Will you operate independently? What happens if supply tightens or market prices fluctuate? Grimm's composure wavered slightly. He realized the young lord had seen through him. Yet, he remained confident that Conford's desperate need for resources would force me to compromise. He believed I had no other choice. However, my next words shattered his confidence. My smile vanished, replaced by cold authority. Leaning forward, I stated, I appreciate the intent, but some things, like grain, must be controlled by the Lord's manor. There is no room for negotiation. I emphasized the word must. Grimm felt a chill. I continued, mocking. Do you really think I must rely on your supply? How low can your low prices actually go? Count Rockefort has already promised to supply us with grain at 1 silver coin per 100 kilograms. I was bluffing, betting that Grimm couldn't verify this and knew of my close ties to the Count. The price was impossibly low, even for a relative. Grimm's eyes widened in shock and panic. If true, his plan to use grain as a bargaining chip was dead. They couldn't beat that price. Recalling my special access to the governor's mansion, Grimm believed the lie. The Count's support seemed plausible, and Grimm's confidence evaporated. He had misjudged Conford's strength and the Lord's resolve. Seeing my bluff succeed, I remained composed. I pressed my advantage. Regarding salt, Conford is 10 kilometers from Amber Bay. We have an inexhaustible supply. We are rebuilding the docks. Why would we rely on your expensive inland salt? As for iron, the Solonians are defeated, and the mines they controlled are now ours. We will soon be self-sufficient in iron and even export it. Observing Grimm's defeat, I knew I had won. Therefore, Mr. Grimm, we must redefine the terms of our cooperation regarding these key materials. Conford welcomes investment, but all business must operate under the Lord's manor's rules. We can cooperate, but I retain ultimate authority and interpretive power. I leaned forward, my gaze sharp. My stance is clear. Follow my rules, and Conford will develop while your caravans profit. But if anyone tries to exploit Conford's perceived weakness for illicit gain, my voice chilled, you will be sent back where you came from. Conford does not welcome such partners. Grimm took a deep breath, his scheme shattered. Wiping sweat from his brow, he bowed subserviently. My apologies, my lord. Your foresight is unmatched. I was nearly led astray. Everything shall be done as you command. The Southern United Chamber of Commerce is ready to contribute to Conford's prosperity under your rules. He realized his plan to monopolize key industries and seize leverage had failed. Facing this shrewd, well-backed young lord, he had no choice but to seek legitimate opportunities within my constraints. Seeing Grimm yield, I knew it was time to define the framework. I sat upright, my demeanor steady, and began outlining my commercial regulations. Very well, Mr. Grimm. Let us discuss the scope of operations. Salt, iron, and grain are strategic goods. Trading them requires a franchise license from the Lord's Manor. Unlicensed trade will be treated as smuggling and severely punished. Grimm nodded quickly. Understood, my lord. Such vital resources should indeed be managed by the manor. I continued. You may open 3 grain shops, 1 grocery, 1 textile shop, and 1 ironware shop. However, the iron and grain licenses require separate audits. As for pricing, grain shall be 1.7 silver coins per 100 kilograms. This is slightly below the kingdom's average, but fair given transport costs and your margins. I knew that while I could get cheaper grain through Count Rockefort, long-term reliance on favors was dangerous. A stable, publicly known price that allowed for profit was better for establishing a healthy market. Grimm calculated quickly. The price allowed for a profit margin despite the northern frontier's transport costs. The price is fair, my lord. I have no objections. I added. Other goods like textiles may be priced by you, but you must report to the manor to prevent price gouging. We are men of integrity, Grimm promised. Regarding locations, the commercial zone in the shanty town costs 50 gold coins annually for prime spots, 20 for secondary. Itinerant peddlers will pay 5 silver coins monthly. Grimm chose 2 prime spots for his grain and grocery shops. Agreed, I said. I also plan to build a public warehouse near the docks for caravans to rent. We can discuss details later. Grimm's eyes lit up. This was exactly what they needed. Finally, the tax, a tithe of 10% on all revenue, audited monthly by the manor's tax officials. Grimm and his associates exchanged glances. The rate was standard for the Plantagenet kingdom. They were more concerned with fairness than the rate itself. My lord, Grimm asked, how will you ensure fairness? We often suffer from extortion and double taxation elsewhere. I promised, taxation will be handled by my direct appointees. Accounts will be transparent. There will be no arbitrary extortion. I seek sustainable revenue, not to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. My authority exists to enforce the rules, not break them. My firm commitment eased their concerns. They had rarely encountered a lord who combined such firm control with a clear commitment to order. A transparent 10% tax was far better than the hidden costs elsewhere. Grimm bowed deeply. We admire your vision, my lord. We will abide by your rules and believe Conford will become a commercial paradise. With the framework set, the merchants departed, respectful of the young lord's style, ready to prepare their businesses. As they left, I stood in the council hall, exhaling and rubbing my temples. Balancing cooperation with the protection of my territory's interests was exhausting. A win-win direction was set, but this was only the beginning. The tedious details, contracts, zoning, tax calculations, and arbitration would require professional execution. My thoughts turned to my loyal steward, Edgar. Edgar, who had followed me since the Franklin family days, was now the core of Conford's administration, and his burden was too heavy. From civil affairs to engineering, everything passed through his hands. Edgar was like a tireless machine, handling a tidal wave of tasks. This centralized model worked for now, but with the population reaching 30,000, it was unsustainable. Efficiency would drop, errors would occur, and the entire system risked collapse if Edgar faltered. It is time, I decided. I must institutionalize the power structure and define roles so the territory can run efficiently without relying on one man's exhaustion. I sat at my oak desk, taking a piece of local paper and a quill. I mentally organized the territory's needs. I began to write, the quill scratching against the paper. The structure must be flat and efficient. 5 core departments should cover our immediate and future needs. First and foremost, the Ministry of War. I underlined the Ministry of War, defining its core functions: training, combat readiness, logistics, and operational command. It will oversee all Conford military units, including main forces, cavalry, militia, and the future Navy. The ministry will manage fortifications, weapons/armor production, and the procurement of all military supplies. It is also responsible for strategic planning and executing specific military operations. Given that Conford's survival depends on military strength, all resources must prioritize defense. Consequently, the Ministry of War will be granted supreme authority and resource priority. I decided to serve as minister personally to ensure firm control over the military. Brendan, known for his experience and prestige, will serve as the executive officer for daily operations. Second is the Ministry of Finance, the territory's purse and bloodline, responsible for all revenue and expenditure. It will manage tax collection, land rents, and the state monopoly on strategic goods like salt and iron. The ministry will oversee the Lord's Manor accounts and audit all other departments to prevent waste and corruption. Its core mission is to maximize income and strictly control spending. I hesitated on the minister. This role is the most critical and difficult to fill. The position requires a steward who is not only a financial expert, but also fiercely loyal and bold enough to challenge even the Lord. Hans will act as interim, but I know his limitations. He is loyal but lacks the expertise for complex future operations. This is a temporary measure. Recruiting a professional financial expert is a top priority. Third is the Ministry of Organization, responsible for the assessment of all civil and military officials. It will manage appointments, promotions, talent databases, and the recruitment of skilled individuals from the refugee population. Controlling personnel is key to development and preventing corruption or factionalism. Edgar is the undisputed choice for minister. His deep knowledge of the staff and his impartial, trustworthy nature make him the only candidate. This role allows him to focus on personnel management, utilizing his strengths while freeing him from daily trivialities. Finally, the Ministry of Livelihood. This department ensures stability by managing refugee resettlement and land reclamation. It will oversee infrastructure, census records, disaster relief, and public health. Public sentiment is the foundation of rule. Stable livelihoods ensure a steady supply of soldiers and social order. I favor the scribe, Maul, for this role due to his patience and current involvement in these tasks. Maul's expertise in engineering and construction aligns perfectly with the department's goals. Finally, the Lord's Manor. I wrote the name at the top of the page, emphasizing its importance. It will serve as the supreme decision-making hub for Confort. It will stand above the 5 departments, focusing on macro strategy and final arbitration. All major proposals and cross-departmental issues will be funneled here for final approval. All major decrees and high-level appointments must be vetted by the Lord's Manor. Currently, however, this brain is just me. I lack a mature cabinet or a circle of strategic advisors. The burden of analysis and decision-making rests entirely on my shoulders. While Edgar and Brendan are excellent executors, they are not yet partners capable of high-level strategic planning. Cabinet. Privy Council. I'm used. A robust Lord's Manor will eventually require a core circle of trusted, capable advisors. This group would meet regularly to share the burden of governance and long-term planning. This transition is essential for me to evolve from a hands-on manager to a mature ruler. Not yet, I thought, acknowledging the lack of talent and the need for time to build trust. For now, I must remain the sole decision-maker while cultivating potential future leaders. Tommy shows promise, but requires further training and observation. I set down my pen and examined the document. The departments, linked by the Lord's Manor, form the skeleton of Conford's future governance. Despite current vacancies, this clear structure is a milestone in my path toward rational, systematic rule. The framework is set, I thought. Now, I must find the right people to fill these roles and bring the system to life. I folded the paper and locked it in my desk. I planned to discuss the plan with Edgar soon to begin turning the vision into reality. I left the castle and headed toward the bustling outer city. The sunlight on the streets improved my mood. I soon spotted Edgar approaching with Tommy, Anna, and Sarah. Tommy greeted me with his family, expressing deep gratitude for the housing Edgar had arranged. I smiled warmly, helping them up. It is your due. You performed a great service, and caring for the families of heroes is a Lord's duty. I felt comforted seeing the tearful mother and Sarah, whose pale face finally showed signs of life. I'll join you to see your new home, I said, signaling Edgar to lead the way. They arrived at a sturdy 2-story wooden house near the inner city wall, a significant upgrade from the shanties at the mountain's base. Inside, The house was clean and well-furnished, featuring a fireplace, furniture, and even a vase of wildflowers, creating a cozy atmosphere. Sarah cheered, running excitedly through the rooms, her face bright with a long-lost, youthful joy. Tommy's mother touched the furniture, tearfully thanking me and Edgar. I felt my heart soften at the sight. "Stay here for now," I told them. "Once the first Tunbeo is built in the plains, you will move into even safer, more spacious stone houses." After settling them, I and Edgar stepped into a quiet corner outside. "Edgar, I have a proposal for Conford's future governance," I said, handing over an organizational chart. Edgar read the parchment carefully. His expression shifted from calm to surprise, then deep contemplation. The structure was remarkably detailed, far surpassing the era's typical reliance on a lord's personal whim and a few stewards. "This is incredibly thorough," Edgar said, admiring yet hesitant. "If implemented, it would boost efficiency, but we lack the reliable manpower for such specific divisions." Seeing himself appointed as Minister of the Ministry of Organization, he felt immense pressure. "I fear I am not qualified for such a heavy responsibility." I patted his shoulder firmly. "I trust your ability and loyalty. That is exactly why you must lead it. I don't want you to do everything yourself. I want you to use your authority to discover and train others to share the load." I pointed to the chart. "Conford lacks talent. I grant you full authority to vet and promote potential candidates. We must build this framework to ensure long-term development." Edgar felt a surge of responsibility and warmth. He bowed deeply. "I understand, my lord. I will do my utmost to organize our personnel and scout for talent to get this system running." "Excellent," I said. "The Ministry of Organization is the heart of this system. It must be built efficiently, and you cannot do it alone." I instructed him to establish 2 deputy positions. One for the civil service, handling administration, finance, and trade, and one for the military, managing promotions, performance, and reserves. Professionalism is key. We must also establish a performance evaluation division to set uniform standards for assessing officials' merit, ability, and character. Given the scarcity of talent, I proposed a radical shift. We don't have time to rely on background or status. The Performance Evaluation Division must design practical exams. Whether for a scribe or a soldier, merit must be proven through testing and performance, not recommendations. Edgar nodded, noting the points. "Brilliant. Exams will prevent nepotism and reveal true talent. I will draft the details immediately." "Correct," I added. "We also need a personnel appointment division to handle the actual hiring, promotions, and transfers based on the evaluations." I clarified the process. Evaluation assesses merit, appointment proposes changes, and you, as minister, review them before I give final approval. This ensures clarity, fairness, and efficiency. Edgar fully grasped the vision. "I understand, my lord. I will begin scouting for talent among the refugees and set up the testing process immediately." I held up a hand. "Wait, there is another matter regarding market stability." Edgar stopped, listening intently. "My agreement with Grimm's merchants is only a temporary measure. Forcing them to obey rules only works for a while. Merchants are driven by profit. We cannot rely on their self-restraint for our survival. We must have our own state-run shops to maintain control." Edgar realized the implication. "You mean the Lord's Manor will enter the market?" "Exactly. We will trade in salt, iron, and grain, not for profit, but to stabilize prices and ensure supply." I detailed the plan. "We will acquire grain in small batches from various merchants to avoid suspicion or price spikes. Most will go to our strategic reserves for famine relief and official salaries. A portion will be sold at the market rate of 4 silver coins per 100 kilograms. We don't need to profit. We just need to establish our reputation and provide an alternative to private merchants. Most importantly, if private merchants hoard goods to inflate prices, we can flood the market with our reserves to stabilize it." Edgar nodded in admiration. "A brilliant strategy. We use their channels to stock up while keeping the leash on the market. And for the long term," I added, "we will form our own trade caravans. With the Solonians defeated, the northern frontier's resources, furs, herbs, and timber, are now ours for the taking. We can organize hunting and gathering to sell in the prosperous south, securing vital funds and supplies for Conford's future. I waved Edgar off, noting that while trade was a long-term goal, our current priority was stability. Keep this in mind for later. We'll pursue it once we are settled. Edgar bowed. Understood, my lord. I will focus on the state-run shops and grain/salt reserves, keeping the trade caravan idea for when the time is right. Inside the warm wooden house, the oil lamp light dispelled the northern frontier's chill, illuminating Tommy's long-awaited family reunion. His sister Sarah explored the two-story house with delight, her laughter echoing through the rooms and washing away the past half-year's gloom. Anna began quietly tidying their new home. She arranged their few belongings with gentle care, imprinting the space with the feeling of home. Tommy placed his final bag down and handed his mother a heavy, coarse-cloth money pouch. Anna looked at him in confusion. "It's the money from selling our old house in Gallon Village," Tommy whispered. Anna was shocked by the weight of the bag. Opening it, she found it filled with silver coins and even a few dazzling gold coins. She looked up in disbelief. "So much? How could our dilapidated house be worth this much?" Tommy explained. "The Lord said this is what our home was worth." Though he omitted the potential pressure I exerted, Anna understood the implication. Her hands trembled as she clutched the pouch, eyes reddening. "The Lord, He is truly our benefactor." For a family that had lost everything, this money was a lifeline. Yet, a wave of sadness followed. "We have truly left Gallon Village now. Your father is still left alone on that hillside." Tommy held her cold hand firmly. "That doesn't matter, Mother. Conford is our new home now. Once we are settled, I will ask the Lord for leave to bring my comrades and move Father's grave to the new cemetery here, so we can visit him often." Anna nodded, tears of relief and hope finally falling. "Yes, that would be best." Composed, Anna smiled. "By the way, Edgar said you were moved to the culture and propaganda department. Does that mean you won't have to go to the front lines anymore?" Seeing her maternal concern, Tommy nodded. "Yes, Mother. The Lord thinks I'm better suited for propaganda work in the rear." "Thank goodness." Anna sighed, her face blooming with relief. A mother's greatest wish was her son's safety. Knowing he would serve in the secure rear eased her heart. "Work hard and repay the Lord's kindness," she urged. "I will, Mother," Tommy promised. Anna turned to the stove, the scent of a simple meal filling the house. Watching his mother work and hearing his sister upstairs, Tommy felt a profound sense of peace and happiness. Yet, a subtle sense of loss lingered beneath the warmth. He was grateful for the Lord's favor and his mother's love, and he wanted to contribute to their new life. But memories of the battlefield, the smoke, the shouts, and Captain Leon's charge stirred the warrior's blood within him. He still longed to prove his worth among his comrades. The thrill of danger and brotherhood was irreplaceable. Torn between domestic responsibility and the warrior's honor, Tommy stood in the light, burdened by a complex, bittersweet conflict. Play City, deep within the Plantagenet Palace. Unlike the bustling, raw energy of the northern frontier, the palace atmosphere was complex and stifling. It was a mix of grand ceremony, hidden sorrow, and the silence of those bound by fate. The massive procession for Princess Louise's marriage to the north was being finalized in King's Square. The scale was breathtaking, featuring over 100 carriages, including the princess's gilded 8-wheeled carriage adorned with the Plantagenet emblem. There were wagons for dowries, carriages for attendants, and transport for the knights and supplies. Royal purple banners and the Schmidt family flags snapped in the winter wind. Hundreds of servants and craftsmen scurried about, polishing gold and securing decorations of wheat and olive branches. From afar, it looked like a display of absolute royal prestige. Yet, a closer look revealed the desperation and posturing beneath the surface. The kingdom had been ravaged by the Solonians, leading to trade collapse and plummeting tax revenue. The treasury was exhausted from years of war and court spending. The royal family lacked the actual wealth to properly outfit the princess or support the war-torn northern frontier. Thus, this grand procession was more a performance of political symbolism than a delivery of practical resources. The room was filled with heavy sandalwood chests containing ancient, obscure texts, manuscripts, and royal historical documents, symbols of civilization, meant to showcase the Plantagenet kingdom's heritage to the groom. Wrapped in parchment and silk, They smelled of aged ink and camphor. While intended to impress, these items were low priority for Conford, which desperately needed food and military supplies. Several ornate, gem-encrusted ceremonial plate armor sets, swords, and scepters were displayed on velvet-covered stands. Though aesthetically stunning, these pieces were crafted for lightness and display, sacrificing protective integrity for graceful lines. They were useless for actual combat, serving only as future decor for the Lord's Hall or ceremonial props. The collection also included massive, lavishly framed oil paintings depicting famous Plantagenet battles, royal portraits, and mythological scenes. A limited selection of royal gold and silver plate, along with heavy, decorative silks, rounded out the dowry. These items were less a dowry and more a political performance, using visual luxury to mask the royal family's crumbling material reality. The square was cold, devoid of festive cheer. Officials managed the preparations with weary, resigned expressions. The guards stood rigid, their eyes vacant. A heavy silence hung over the scene, as everyone understood the hollowness of the grand ceremony. Inside the princess's residence, the Silver Lily Hall, it felt less like a palace and more like a gilded cage. Heavy velvet curtains allowed only slivers of pale light to touch the polished floor. The air was thick with expensive perfume, yet the loneliness remained. Princess Louise ignored the ceremonial wedding gowns and etiquette rehearsals. She sat by the window in a simple linen dress and wool cardigan, her hair tied back, wearing no makeup. A poetry book lay open, but her gaze was fixed on the distant, cold northern frontier. Although the regent, Katharina von Eisenberg, had lifted her house arrest, Louise had no interest in her newfound freedom. Her fate had been sealed by a cold, imperial decree. She was to be married off to the north. Her groom was the guardian of the north, a young hero known only through war reports and courtly songs. I was described as a perfect, brave, and resilient prodigy, 2 years her junior, who had saved the borderlands. Yet, these distant accolades felt hollow and terrifying to a girl about to surrender her entire life to a stranger. She knew nothing of my personality, my voice, or my true nature. I was merely a symbol on a marriage contract, not a flesh-and-blood husband. The thought of leaving the palace of her childhood for the harsh, war-torn north filled her with dread. She felt a profound sense of helplessness and sorrow at the prospect of a lonely, dictated future. "Your Highness," a soft voice called out. Her maid and childhood friend, Alice, entered with a cup of lukewarm herbal tea. Alice's eyes were red-rimmed as she relayed the regent's permission for Louise to take a final, incognito trip through plays before the procession departed. Alice wept, lamenting that once Louise left for the harsh north, she might never return. Louise turned to look at her friend. Alice was her only source of warmth in the cold palace. Seeing Alice's grief, Louise's own composure began to fracture. She patted Alice's hand with a bitter smile, agreeing that it was time to see their home one last time. She asked for simple, inconspicuous clothing. Moments later, Louise and her maid slipped out of the palace, blending into the bustling streets of Place. The city remained vibrant, but to Louise, everything was tinged with the gray of departure. She wandered aimlessly until she stopped before a grand, quiet building. The Royal Library, her secret sanctuary. She stepped inside. The library was vast, filled with the scent of old paper and ink, and rows of shelves like a silent forest. It was quiet enough to hear her own heartbeat. Leaving her maids at the entrance, she walked toward a secluded reading area. Her heart raced. She knew I would likely be there. Her breath hitched when she saw me. A young man in a worn scholar's robe sat by the sunlit window, engrossed in an ancient text. Sunlight highlighted my focused, handsome profile. It was Henry Rochefort, the eldest son of Count Rochefort and brother to Charlotte. By royal custom, the heirs of border lords were kept in the capital. Nominally for education, they were effectively hostages to ensure their father's loyalty. Henry had lived in Place for years, known in scholarly circles, but distanced from his family's power. Louise and Henry had met by chance. She had frequented the library to escape palace politics. Years ago, Henry had caught her when she nearly fell reaching for a book. Since then, they had coincidentally met, discussing history and literature, sharing their inner lives. Henry admired her intelligence, She was drawn to his gentle, scholarly nature. The library was their only refuge from the palace's schemes. A sincere, unspoken affection had blossomed between them. Henry looked up, seeing her pale face beneath the hood. His expression shifted from surprise to joy, then to deep, helpless sorrow. He stood, smoothing his robes, unable to find the words to bridge the distance. News of the princess's distant marriage had spread throughout the royal capital. Henry, Louise approached, her voice a mere sigh as she lowered her hood, revealing a face etched with sorrow. "Your Highness." Henry bowed low, his voice heavy. "Why are you here? Tomorrow you must." He could not finish the sentence. "Yes, I leave tomorrow," Louise said, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. "I just wanted to see this place, and you, one last time." The library was silent, save for dancing dust motes. A profound sense of parting hung between them. Louise gathered her courage and handed Henry a small, silk-wrapped amulet. It was an antique silver badge engraved with the Plantagenet royal family crest. "Take this," she trembled. "My mother left it to me. She said it protects the wearer." Henry accepted the warm amulet with trembling hands, clutching it like a priceless treasure. He then removed a silver chain from his neck, featuring an amber pendant containing a small, green leaf. "Your Highness, please take this," Henry said hoarsely. "It is amber from the forests of my home, Wenham. The leaf represents life and longing. May it keep you from feeling lonely in the northern frontier." Louise gripped the warm amber, tears finally falling. She looked at Henry, making a firm vow. "Henry, remember, no matter where I am or whom I marry, my heart belongs to the sunlight in this library and to you. I will remain loyal. I will find a way to return." Moved by her resolve, Henry felt a crushing sense of helplessness. "I understand," he choked out. "I will wait for you here. My heart is already yours. There is no room for anyone else." They stared at each other, etching their images into their souls as time seemed to freeze. Eventually, a maid's cough signaled that time was up. Louise took one last, lingering look at Henry, trying to imprint his face into her heart. She turned, pulled up her hood to hide her tears, and walked out of the library without looking back. Henry stood frozen, clutching the amulet, watching her silhouette vanish behind the bookshelves. The library remained bright and quiet, but the light of his life had departed. Fate was cruel and absurd. While I in the Northern Territory worried for my sister Charlotte, Princess Louise, bound for the north, carried only Henry in her heart. Place City was alive with electric energy. The main thoroughfare was packed with citizens. The news that Princess Louise was marrying the northern hero, had drawn everyone out to witness the procession. All wanted to see the royal spectacle of the princess departing for the north. The air was thick with festive anticipation as people craned their necks behind the soldiers' lines. "Did you hear? Lord Carl is incredible." At Conford, he held off 100,000 of Solon's savages with only a few hundred men. "Is that true? A hero indeed. The royal decree says so. The king is marrying the princess to him to honor his service. A perfect match, a noble princess and a young hero. Only such a hero deserves her." Beyond the praise, the crowd hoped for the traditional royal distribution of coins to mark the occasion. Soon, the rhythmic sound of hooves and solemn music approached. "They're here," the crowd cheered as the royal knights appeared. Mounted on white steeds, the knights wore silver breastplates and gold cloaks embroidered with the Plantagenet crest. With spears held high, they looked like divine warriors, drawing gasps of awe. Behind them marched the massive royal band. Their grand music filled the air, pushing the atmosphere to a fever pitch. Then came the centerpiece, the princess's carriage. It was a gilded, palace-like carriage pulled by 8 white horses. The carriage was adorned with Plantagenet crests and vine patterns, its heavy velvet curtains drawn tight. Following were endless wagons of dowry, silks, gold, and antiques, displaying royal wealth. The royal infantry brought up the rear, their rhythmic march displaying the crown's power. Servants began tossing commemorative princess wedding coins to the crowd. These unique coins were minted specifically for the wedding. Free money. Grab the luck. The crowd erupted into a frenzy. People scrambled for the coins, eager to share in the royal fortune. Those who caught them showed them off with pride. In stark contrast to the noise, Princess Louise sat in the carriage with a cold heart. Dressed in her finest bridal gown and crown, she sat with perfect, doll-like posture. Yet, her eyes were filled with hollow sorrow, devoid of any bridal joy. To her, this was not a wedding. It was a political exile. She was leaving her home and loved ones for the desolate northern frontier to marry a hero she had only seen in portraits. The future felt like a thick, joyless fog. Impulsively, she parted the heavy curtain with a gloved finger, glancing at the cheering strangers outside. Their faces blurred, failing to stir any emotion in her. Their pure, simple joy only highlighted her own isolation. Suddenly, her gaze locked onto a familiar figure in the crowd. Despite his plain clothes and lowered head, she recognized Henry instantly. As if by telepathy, Henry's gaze pierced the crowd, meeting her tear-filled blue eyes behind the curtain. For a moment, time stood still. The noise, the grand procession, and the scattering coins faded into a blurred backdrop. Their eyes locked, conveying a torrent of love, agony, and desperate helplessness. They saw each other's tears and inner struggle. Without a word, this silent gaze served as their final farewell against fate. The carriage moved on, the curtain closed, and Henry's figure vanished into the crowd. Princess Louise slumped back, her last shred of strength shattered. She closed her eyes, hot tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks onto her cold, luxurious wedding gown. Outside, the cheers were deafening. Inside, she felt trapped in a desolate, icy wasteland. Deep within the palace, Queen Mother Katerina watched the procession through a crack in the velvet curtains. She peered through a brass telescope at the noisy, slow-moving column. A cold, satisfied smirk tugged at the corners of her aging but well-maintained face. In her view, the gilded carriage was a cage carrying away her greatest threat. Finally, that little bitch Louise is out of the royal capital, she whispered with relief. As the late queen's eldest daughter, Louise possessed the purest Plantagenet bloodline. This posed a direct threat to her young son Sigmund, whose hold on the throne, backed by the Eisenberg family, remained shaky. As long as Louise remained, she served as a rallying point for disgruntled nobles and old regime loyalists. She had been a constant thorn in Katerina's side. Now that the obstacle was banished to the desolate northern frontier, she finally breathed easy. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Katerina stiffened, then relaxed, leaning back into the embrace. She knew it was her lover and confidant, Victor. "Did you see?" she asked, leaning against his chest, seeking validation. "Our princess has set off for her hero husband's fortress. The capital will be quiet now, and those old fools will have to pipe down." Victor rested his chin on her head, watching the carriage fade into a golden thread on the horizon. Indeed, she left with all the pomp and ceremony required by royal protocol. "A brilliant move, Your Majesty." His tone shifted to cold pragmatism. However, compared to the entrenched ministers and the regional dukes who ignore royal decrees, Louise was the easiest obstacle. The real challenges lie ahead. Katerina turned in his arms, her silk robe slipping to reveal her neck. She looked up at him with a mix of dependency and admiration. She traced his jawline with a finger, purring, "But I have you, Victor. You are so capable. We will deal with those stubborn old men and warlords one by one, won't we?" Victor kissed her cold fingertips, his eyes burning with desire and control. "Of course, I will clear every obstacle for you, my Katerina. This kingdom will be ours." The air grew heavy with passion, replacing their political discussion. Victor moved to carry her toward the private daybed. Suddenly, a cold thought struck Katerina, and she frowned. She pressed a hand against his arm to stop him. "Wait, Victor," she said, her tone sharpening with calculation. "I'm worried about something." Victor paused, waiting for her to explain. He knew she wasn't one to be blinded by passion. "What if Louise and that border lord, I, have a child?" She spoke rapidly. "A legitimate royal heir. Their claim would be far stronger than our little Sigmund's. The old factions could use the child to overthrow us in the name of restoring the true line. And what if Conford grows strong under me? I am a capable commander, and I have ties to Count Rochefort, that old fox who only pretends to be loyal. If they join forces in the north, they'll be impossible to uproot." Her anxiety grew as she envisioned a future where their descendants marched on Play City to reclaim the throne. Victor, however, merely offered a mocking, confident smile. He dismissed her fears as mere fantasy. He stroked her back soothingly. "My dear Katerina, you worry too much. It will never come to that. First, the Solonians won't let me be. They suffered heavy losses at Conford and are vengeful by nature. They won't allow Conford to thrive. The war in the north will only intensify because of my presence. Can I survive the meat grinder of the north forever? It's a question of whether I even live long enough to be a threat." His eyes turned icy. "And even if I do succeed, so what? We sent Louise there with full royal sanction. As long as we hold the throne, we have the authority to command them. We can order me to suppress rebellions or attack Solonian strongholds, effectively bleeding my forces dry under the guise of royal duty. We can impose loyalty or support taxes on me, or demand tributes of northern specialties, war horses, and refined iron, using the royal treasury's needs as a pretext to drain and restrict me. If I comply, I bleed resources. If I resist, we label me a rebel and rally other nobles to suppress me. The initiative remains ours." Victor whispered coldly. "As for the child, the north is harsh, lacking medicine and prone to chaos. A frail infant or a princess needing recovery could easily succumb to accidents during travel or illness. It would be a natural tragedy. Who would dare investigate? We can then feign grief to display royal benevolence." Katerina's doubts vanished under Victor's ruthless, precise analysis. She felt relieved, gazing at him with a mix of security and adoration for his cunning. "You think of everything," she smiled, leaning into his arms. "I was foolish to worry. With you, I fear nothing." Victor chuckled, swept her up, and carried her toward the bed. "Let's not waste time on distant, unlikely troubles. The night is short." Katerina laughed softly, wrapping her arms around his neck. Victor kicked the velvet curtains shut, sealing out the world. The room filled with the sounds of rising desire and hushed whispers. By early March, the northern winter lingered, with icy winds whipping from Amber Bay across the sprawling shantytown beneath Conford Mountain. The air was biting, and the ground frozen solid. Yet, at the heart of the refugee district, a new opening brought a rare sense of normalcy and excitement. A large, official shop officially opened its doors to a curious crowd. The storefront stood in stark contrast to the surrounding makeshift shacks. It was a renovated wood and stone warehouse, reinforced and plastered with mud and straw. Above the door hung a polished oak sign with simple carvings. It read Conford First Shop in bold, tar-painted letters. Beside it, a flag bearing my crest signaled its official status. The shop was spacious and well-organized. The entrance featured a sand-covered foyer to manage the flow of people. The interior was divided into grain, fabric, and salt and iron sections. Each area had sturdy wooden counters for displaying samples. The grain section held oats, barley, and some wheat. The fabric section stocked wool, linen, and limited cotton. The salt and iron section featured barrels of sea salt and essential tools like hoes, sickles, and iron pots. Uniformed clerks managed the counters, assisting customers with weighing and sales. A manager oversaw operations, while 2 cashiers handled accounts in a secure, fenced-off area. The shop structure was simple yet highly efficient. The manager, Hermann, was a man in his 40s with graying hair and a weathered face. He possessed a quiet, sorrowful demeanor, but his eyes remained sharp and calculating. I had personally recruited him from the refugee masses. Hermann had been a successful grain merchant in a central town for 20 years. He was known for his integrity, expertise in storage, and meticulous bookkeeping. War, however, destroyed his life. Plantagenet deserters turned bandits sacked his town, looting his shop and savings. His wife and children were killed in the chaos while he was away on business. He returned to find his life in ruins. He drifted north to Conford as a shell of a man, his spirit broken. I noticed him while observing refugees, struck by how the man instinctively sorted grain and calculated totals despite his hollow expression. After a careful conversation, I learned of his past. Though depressed, Hermann's professional skills remained intact. I believed giving him responsibility would help him heal while filling a vital role for the territory. I appointed him as the first manager of the official shop. My judgment proved correct. During the 10-day preparation, Hermann regained his focus. He organized the inventory and layout with impressive efficiency. He even trained the clerks in currency verification and customer service. The preparation exceeded my expectations, earning my deep respect. On opening day, the turnout was unprecedented. The state-run shop was swarmed by curious refugees, drawn by the trust they placed in the Lord's authority. Shoppers peered inside, intrigued by the fixed-price system. Prices were clearly written on charcoal-marked wooden boards hung prominently by each item. From grain and wool to salt and iron pots, every price was transparent, eliminating haggling and potential exploitation. For refugees accustomed to predatory merchants, this transparency was an unprecedented safeguard. Business boomed instantly, with long queues forming, especially for grain and salt. People waited anxiously, clutching their hard-earned coins. Edgar and Hermann set grain prices to match private competitors in the shanty town, keeping them slightly below pre-war France City levels to avoid market volatility. Given transport costs and the northern frontiers state, these prices remained affordable. The Lord's backing gave the state shop a massive advantage in credibility. Private merchants, lacking such prestige, naturally lost out to the official brand. Edgar's salt strategy was particularly ingenious. With Conford near Amber Bay, many refugees had returned to traditional salt boiling. Though crude, this earth salt was sufficient for daily use. Edgar seized this opportunity with a flexible procurement strategy. He bought the crude salt at a fair price, refined it, and sold it at near cost, keeping prices extremely low. This served as a powerful loss leader, drawing crowds who would then purchase other goods. It also provided a stable income for the poorest refugees, helping them settle. Finally, it stabilized the market, curbing speculation and winning public favor. Edgar understood that the goal was not immediate profit, but establishing credibility and control. This sacrifice in salt profits was a vital political and economic investment. In contrast, private shops in the shanty town struggled. Business had plummeted since the state shop opened. Unable to compete on price or prestige, they faced immense pressure. Owners scrambled to find strategies, whether through discounts, better service, or niche products. The state shop focused on essentials, leaving room for other goods. It lacked the capacity to stock luxury items like tea, tobacco, fine clothing, or spices. I had no intention of wasting administrative resources on these non-essentials. This was where private merchants remained essential. Consequently, shops owned by Grimm and the Southern Chamber of Commerce thrived nearby. They offered diverse, novel goods that catered to the wealthier artisans and officers. While less profitable than staples, these shops were sustainable and positioned for future growth. I welcomed this, viewing a mix of state-led stability and private vitality as a healthy economy. Yet, my primary focus remained the construction of the Tunbeo. Under Engineer Mall's guidance, Fort No. 1 was being built rapidly on the plains southeast of the Lord's Manor. Mall prioritized internal structures over outer walls to maximize efficiency. The outer defenses would be completed once the interior was functional. This approach streamlined material transport and construction. Early completion of barracks and warehouses boosted morale and relieved pressure on the main manor. With a steady supply of refugee labor, Fort No. 1 took shape within a month. Mall designed the interior with a cross-shaped layout, dividing the fort into 4 functional quadrants. The southwest quadrant housed the barracks, featuring 5 sturdy stone and wood buildings. The walls used local rubble, while the roofs were made of thick timber. Each barrack included heating and ventilation, housing a full platoon. Smaller, separate quarters were provided for junior officers, establishing a clear hierarchy. Mall also included communal baths and toilets to ensure hygiene and prevent disease. I also mandated the inclusion of a lecture hall within the barracks. It was a simple wooden building equipped with tables, benches, and writing boards. I required all soldiers to attend basic literacy classes during their downtime. Instructors were recruited from the literate refugee population. The curriculum covered basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. I aimed to build a modernized army capable of handling complex orders and equipment. Despite initial grumbling from the soldiers, I remained committed to this long-term foundation. The The southeast and northeast quadrants were designated for residential use. Foundations were being laid in the southeast. In the northeast, 30 simple stone and wood houses were already nearing completion. These homes featured stone foundations, wooden walls, and thatched roofs. The new dwellings are sturdy, dry, and windproof, a paradise compared to the shantytown. Priority for occupancy went to the veteran families who supported me during the Battle of Conford and subsequent construction. I offered favorable terms, a symbolic monthly rent of 10 copper coins, backed by a formal rent-to-own agreement. Once total rent equals construction costs, estimated at 5 to 8 years, ownership transfers to the tenant, interest-free. For veterans earning over 1 silver coin monthly, this rent is negligible, and the promise of future ownership is highly attractive. Applications were so numerous that I had to screen candidates based on merit and family size. This strategy binds the core populace's interests to the land of Conford. Mall reserved the northwest corner of the Tunbeo for workshops, carpentry, smithing, leatherworking, and tailoring, to be managed by the Ministry of Livelihood for self-sufficiency. However, this requires skilled craftsmen and equipment, which will take time. With the Solonians weakened and the northern frontier stable, Maul and I decided to delay building massive stone walls and trenches. Prioritizing internal construction to establish living and production capacity is the wiser choice. As a temporary defense, Maul erected 2 3-story wooden watchtowers on high ground. These sturdy towers, equipped with shelters, are manned by trained sentries with gongs and horns for 24-hour surveillance. They provide sufficient warning against small bands of rebels, beasts, or Solonian scouts. Permanent walls can be built later when the territory is wealthier. Watching the smoke rise from Fort No. 1 from the main manor walls, I felt a rare sense of stability. From recruiting refugees to establishing administration, I am turning my blueprint into a solid foundation. Despite the risks and trivial troubles, seeing order emerge from chaos makes my efforts meaningful. Spring in the northern frontier is finally arriving. Tommy's family moved from their temporary wooden hut into a new 2-story stone and wood house in the Tunbeo. It is far more spacious and sturdy than their previous homes in Gallon Village or France City. Sarah was the most excited. She rushed inside, searching for one specific feature. Seeing the sturdy wooden staircase, she cheered. It really has stairs. It's better than before. To her, a staircase is the hallmark of a good house. She ran up and down, filled with pure joy. Anna and Tommy smiled, beginning to move their few belongings. Despite the scent of fresh wood and lime, the family felt a profound sense of belonging. This house was truly their own. Anna touched the stone walls, asking, "Tommy, is this really our home? They just gave it to us." Tommy replied, "Yes, Mom. The Lord's decree says we pay 10 copper coins a month until we reach 30 silver coins. Then the deed is ours." He pulled out his coin purse, smiling. "I just went to the management office and paid the full 30 silver coins with the money from our old house. It's ours now. We chose the 2-story house, which cost more than the 1-story ones." Anna teared up with relief. "It's worth it. You and Sarah will need a home when you marry." She began inspecting her new domain. The house features a large living room and kitchen on the first floor with 2 bedrooms upstairs. Sarah claimed one room, excitedly moving in her meager treasures, smooth stones, a feather, and a rag doll. It was her first private space. Anna took the adjacent room to be near her daughter. Tommy took the downstairs room for easy access and security. They cooked their first dinner together in the new kitchen. Watching his mother's peaceful smile and hearing Sarah's chatter, Tommy felt deeply warmed. After dinner, the sunset bathed their home in gold. Tommy looked around. The house was sturdy but empty. Aside from the fireplace and window frames, they lacked glass, beds, and furniture. They needed to furnish it to make it a true home. "Mom, Sarah," Tommy said, "let's go to the market and buy some things." Sarah cheered. "I want to buy fabric for curtains." Anna nodded. "We should. This is our permanent home now." They locked the door and headed out toward the shanty town. They soon realized the new Tunbeo lacked commercial facilities, with only a small state-run shop for basic rations. For other goods, they had to return to the bustling shanty town at the foot of the mountain. Under Edgar's strict management, The shanty town was no longer chaotic. Edgar enforced sanitation rules, including fines for littering. He organized streets, prohibited illegal expansions, and established a patrol. Refugees, hoping to earn enough for a Tunbeo home, followed these rules, giving the area a sense of hopeful vitality. As Tommy's family entered, they were immediately surrounded by vendors. The vendors recognized them as Tunbeo residents, well-dressed, healthy, and carrying the air of people with a home, marking them as wealthy customers. Vendors shouted to attract customers, their voices lively and bustling. Tommy protected his mother and sister, understanding these struggling people were just trying to survive. He bought 2 rattan baskets, thick pottery bowls, a jar, and a sharp kitchen knife to replace their dull one. Sarah gazed longingly at a stall selling hair ribbons and a small, slightly damaged but polished copper mirror. Tommy bought her the red ribbon and the mirror. Sarah clutched them, her face glowing with excitement. At the state-run shop, Tommy bought 50 pounds of rye, as they no longer received free rations. He also purchased salt, sesame oil, and coarse cloth for his mother to sew winter clothes. The shop's prices were fair and the scales accurate. By the time they finished, dusk had fallen. On the way to the Tunbeo, Tommy bought hot roasted cakes for his mother and sister. Anna scolded him for spending, but smiled as she accepted the food. Back at their new home, the simple items brought a sense of warmth and life. Sarah excitedly placed her mirror on the windowsill, admiring her reflection. As Anna planned the new clothes, Tommy felt a deep sense of stability and hope. These small, real joys were things they never dared imagine back in Gowan Village. This all began with the man who saved them. Lord, I brought them this peace and hope. The settlement allowance, new work, and the Tunbeo project gave them the home they dreamed of. Lord, I gave him a future. Tommy's resolve to serve me grew stronger. He felt he had no choice but to repay Lord I with his life and loyalty. This debt of gratitude was heavier than a mountain. At sunset, Edgar climbed the castle's wooden watchtower to escape his endless paperwork. He wanted to witness the transformation of the land firsthand. His gaze fell upon the shanty town, now organized and structured. Simple roads divided the dense shanties into orderly blocks. Despite their simplicity, the rising smoke and faint voices signaled a thriving community. He spotted Tommy's family shopping and heading toward the Tunbeo. Seeing their satisfaction, Edgar felt a rare, quiet sense of relief. He felt a surge of achievement seeing the small town he helped plan come to life. These were real, tangible changes. He envisioned more Tunbeo rising, attracting people and fostering trade. The land, once war-torn, was now peaceful, with everyone striving for a better tomorrow. Seeing ordinary people like Tommy prosper made his toil worthwhile. He looked toward the vast, newly cleared wasteland. Refugees were returning from the fields, carrying simple tools. In the northern frontier, March was the perfect time for digging. The black soil, freshly turned, shimmered with the promise of life. The work points system, co-created with Lord I, had successfully motivated the refugees. Work points were vital, as they would determine future farmland distribution. Higher points meant priority for larger, more fertile plots. The system's transparency and fairness earned the refugees' trust. Edgar ensured everyone could verify their work point records at any time. This openness eliminated fears of exploitation and fueled their labor. Edgar estimated that by the end of spring plowing, the cultivated area would be significant. He planned to acquire draft cattle and pack horses to further boost efficiency. He hoped that by autumn, they could produce enough grain to stop relying on merchants. Edgar watched the weary but hopeful refugees return to the shanty town. These people didn't fear hard work, they only feared having no opportunity. Conford gave them that chance, and they repaid it with sweat and loyalty. He etched the scene into his mind and descended the tower. By the time he returned to the castle, it was dark. Lord I was dining in the hall by candlelight. Edgar noticed the table was far more lavish than the meager meals of months past. This was thanks to the refugees settling along Amber Bay. Former fishermen were now harvesting shellfish, crabs, and sea urchins from the tidal flats. Having never seen the ocean in my previous life, I was fascinated by these gifts. I had the logistics team purchase these fresh catches from the fishermen. Seafood is simple to prepare. Boiling it in water brings out its ultimate freshness. My plate held boiled oysters, their plump meat glistening under the candlelight. Recalling Maupassant's My Uncle Jules, I finally had the chance to experience the oysters I had once read about with such longing. Cautious, I chose to boil them rather than eat them raw, yet the sweet, rich flavor was deeply satisfying. My meal also included open-shelled clams, small red shrimp, and some strange-looking but flavorful barnacles. Mindful of modern health, I knew high-purine seafood could trigger gout. Thus, my table was balanced with boiled turnips, radishes, and seasonal cabbage. I also had wild raspberries from the northern frontier, hot milk, and coarse black bread. I avoided the wine and wheat beer common among nobles, fearing the purine content. Edgar watched the eccentric, yet vibrant dinner with a relieved smile. This small table was a microcosm of Conford's gradual recovery and improving quality of life. He approached as I clumsily pried open a barnacle with the table corner, struggling to extract the meat with a silver fork. I waved him over. Edgar, you're just in time. Try these. They're fresh from Amber Bay, very unique. I can't finish them all. Edgar sat opposite me without hesitation. A servant brought him utensils, and he curiously examined the barnacle. As they ate, they discussed the territory's affairs in low voices. Edgar pried open a barnacle and tasted the meat, exclaiming at its unexpected deliciousness. It's a pity, my lord, that we don't have the fine wheat ale Count Rochefort sent last time to pair with this feast. I waved my hand. Edgar, you don't understand. You shouldn't pair beer, even ale, with shellfish. Edgar looked confused. Why? Isn't fine wine meant for fine food? I smiled mysteriously. A knowledgeable teacher at school in Franklin once told me that grain-based alcohol reacts poorly with seafood. It can cause joint pain. It's better to stick to milk or water. Though skeptical, Edgar accepted the advice, deferring to the authority of my Franklin teacher. The conversation shifted to my past in Franklin. Franklin is coastal, but its cliffs and deep ports lack the gentle beaches and rich intertidal zones of Amber Bay. I never had such seafood there. I added with a self-deprecating smirk. I've always preferred river fish and shrimp, which seemed odd compared to the beef and chicken favored by other young nobles. Perhaps that's why Duke Schmidt disliked me. I wasn't manly enough. My mother, Lady Irene, suffered much in the family because of me. Edgar felt a pang of sympathy and comforted me. My lord, don't take it to heart. The Duke was often misguided. But look at your achievements. You've built this foundation in the northern frontier with your own hands. That proves everything. Edgar steered toward the future. With your upcoming wedding to Princess Louise, a major event, the Schmidt family will surely send someone of status. I suspect Lady Irene will come. She will be incredibly proud of the man you've become. My hand paused at the mention of Lady Irene, my expression complex. I still felt a sense of detachment regarding this mother. From the original Carl's memories, she was a gentle, loving woman who had been powerless to protect him. The memories were warm, but for the transmigrated me, this maternal bond felt like a heavy responsibility. I replied cautiously, if she comes, that would be good. I miss her too. I decided to treat her with the respect due to a mother, regardless of my internal distance. Edgar noticed the hesitation but attributed it to nerves. I dipped a shrimp in salt and remarked with a touch of sarcasm. We've been so busy building the castle and settling refugees. I almost forgot that a noble princess is on her way to this northern paradise. If she arrives and sees the shanty town at the castle's foot, will she think her heroic prince consort lives in a refugee camp? Edgar listened to the bitterness in my tone. He knew this marriage was purely political. I still loved Charlotte, the daughter of Count Rochefort, and the forced sacrifice of my love fueled my resentment. Edgar set down his fork. My lord, you are right. The shanty town is unsightly, and the princess's retinue arrives in a month. We should tidy up the area so we don't appear disrespectful. Tidy up? I scoffed. Edgar, you know we lack funds. Every coin must go to walls, cattle, and grain. I have no money for vanity projects for a princess I've never met. I raised my voice. If she's scared off by the reality of the northern frontier, let her complain to her brother the king. I don't want to marry her anyway. Edgar sighed, understanding my need to vent. He replied firmly, My lord, I understand. But this is for your own dignity and the reputation of the Schmidt family. He added the clincher. Think of Lady Irene. She will likely represent the family at your wedding. Do you want her to see you living in such squalor? Or do you want her to be proud of your accomplishments? The mention of my mother silenced my outburst. I frowned, the original Carl's guilt and love for his mother weighing heavily on me. Edgar pressed on. We don't need major construction. Just clear the trash, tidy the road, and put up some fences and flags. It won't cost much, but it will show the order and dignity expected of a lord, and ensure your family isn't disappointed. I sighed, finally relenting. Fine, you're right. We must keep costs minimal and avoid any extravagance to spare my mother's feelings. Understood, my lord. I will personally oversee every coin to ensure nothing is wasted, Edgar promised, relieved. Dinner remained somber. Despite my compromise, my frustration over this forced political marriage lingered. I knew welcoming the princess was merely the start of a complex, exhausting political performance I had to master. 3 days later, a dusty, peculiar caravan arrived at the camp beneath Conford Mountain, drawing significant attention. The caravan was large, carrying livestock from the Blackstone Pass and Wharton's Castle regions. They were known for trading grain and iron with the Scarn people for horses. Notably, the caravan also included several wagons loaded with heavy, sealed wooden crates. The crates were wrapped in thick, waterproof tarps, concealing their contents. Refugees and soldiers assumed they were merely more trade goods. The caravan leader requested an audience, and I received him in the Lord's Hall. The man was lean and dark-skinned, possessing the sharp, wary gaze of a border merchant. He bowed respectfully. Lord Carl, I am Blake. I trade in the Blackstone Pass, often exchanging iron for horses with the Scarn. I tapped my armrest, thoughtful. The man's blunt admission of trading restricted iron surprised me. Only someone powerful could conduct such trade safely. Mr. Blake, you've traveled far. What could Conford, a land recovering from war, possibly offer you in exchange for these goods? I glanced outside. I have plenty of labor for farming. I don't need your livestock. Blake smiled knowingly and lowered his voice. Count Rockefort of France City suggested I visit you, claiming you have special cargo we desperately need. Hearing the Count's name, I realized. The merchant, the sealed wagons, the recommendation, the buyer for the Solon heads had finally arrived. I leaned back, eyes sharp. Mr. Blake, my stock is significant. Are your crates and your sincerity heavy enough to match it? Blake smiled confidently. Rest assured, my lord, we are well prepared with gold and supplies. Good, I replied, cutting to the chase. I have 2,300 lime-treated Solon heads. This includes 283 Solon berserkers, 672 regular soldiers, and over 1,345 vanguard fodder and turncoats. Blake calculated rapidly. He knew the market. These heads were valuable, but varied in price. Berserker heads, proof of high martial prowess, fetched 30 gold coins each. Regular soldiers were worth 5 to 10 gold. Vanguard fodder were worth only a few silver coins. Turncoats and Plantagenet slaves were essentially worthless. My precise inventory proved I was a serious seller. Still, as a cautious merchant, Blake needed to verify the quality. Your precision is admirable, my lord, Blake said. However, per custom, I must inspect the goods, especially the berserkers, to verify their authenticity. I nodded readily. Understandable. Follow me. I led Blake and his 2 appraisers to a remote corner of the outer city. A large, cool stone cellar, once used for storage, now held the heads. The heavy door opened, releasing a stench of lime and decay. Inside, rows of wooden shelves held burlap-wrapped objects, each tagged with information. Blake's appraisers were Solonians themselves, experts in their own people's features. Under the torchlight, they began randomly selecting and unwrapping the berserker packages. They checked for northern Solonian bone structure, thick, with prominent brow ridges. They looked for tribal tattoos, tooth wear to determine age, and neck wounds to verify the intensity of the combat. The inspection was silent and professional. The team worked with expert efficiency. They moved with precision, wasting no time. They unwrapped the lime-preserved heads, revealing recognizable features. They exchanged brief, cryptic jargon, their tone as casual as discussing the weather. Their cold, clinical treatment of human remains as mere commodities sent a chill down my spine. Their dehumanization of the dead was a different, deeper level of cruelty. The inspection took time, focusing heavily on the high-value berserker heads. They examined every single one, ensuring no inferior heads were mixed in. The inspectors finished their count and whispered their report to Blake. Blake's stern expression softened into satisfaction and surprise as he listened. The quality of the goods had clearly exceeded his expectations. Turning to me, Blake offered a professional, apologetic smile. "My apologies for the wait, Lord Carl. Your special cargo is of superior quality and well-preserved. The nearly 300 berserker heads are unmistakable, with clear totems and distinct anatomy. We are satisfied and ready to trade." The group left the damp, lime-scented basement. The afternoon sun and fresh air provided a welcome relief from the cellar's oppressive atmosphere. In a quiet parlor at the Lord's Manor, I, Edgar, Blake, and his chief appraiser gathered over tea. Blake opened the negotiations, aiming to control the pace. He cleared his throat and proposed a fair base price. "Lord Carl, following official bounties and standard market rates, a genuine Solon berserker head is worth 30 silver coins. A regular soldier's head is 5 silver coins. As for the Vanguard Battalion militia," he paused dismissively, "they are of little value, usually just filler. But since you have a complete collection, we will buy them at 5 silver coins each as a gesture of goodwill. How does that sound?" "It is a very fair market rate." I listened calmly. When Blake finished, I met his gaze steadily. "Mr. Blake, you are quoting the standard rate for bulk scrap, but you are deliberately ignoring the most critical factor. You are merchants profiting from the spread, but my soldiers and I paid for these heads with our blood and lives on the battlefield. Does our sacrifice not warrant a significant labor fee?" I leaned forward, firm. "My price is 50 gold coins per berserker head, 10 gold coins per regular soldier, and 10 silver coins per militia head. That is the only price that honors my men's blood." Blake feigned shock, nearly jumping up. 50 gold, 10 gold. That is absurd. It is far beyond market rates. We will lose money. I watched the performance with a cold inner smile. I waited for Blake to finish before striking the killing blow. "Mr. Blake, before you cry about losses, tell me, in the entire Plantagenet kingdom, can you find another seller who can provide such a massive quantity, especially 300 berserker heads?" The question pierced Blake's facade. He opened his mouth to argue, but no convincing words came out. Both men knew the truth. Before the epic defense of Conford, no Solonian force had ever suffered such a catastrophic, organized defeat. Other frontier fortresses barely held their ground, yielding only scattered heads of common soldiers. Conford's ability to repel a 100,000-strong army and harvest such a bounty was unprecedented. This was an absolute seller's market. There was no other source for such spoils. Seeing Blake's panic, I felt my confidence solidify. I leaned back, my tone heavy with authority. "Mr. Blake, we are both sensible men. You and your backers desperately need these goods. Otherwise, you wouldn't have traveled to this war-torn frontier while the roads were still dangerous." I paused, my gaze fixed on the wagons. "The price stands. For those who truly understand their value, these heads are worth far more than what I am asking." Cold sweat beaded on Blake's forehead. I had struck the exact nerve of Count Eisenberg's most secret vulnerability. Count Eisenberg's Blackstone Pass had fallen almost without a fight at the start of the Solonian invasion. This left a massive, indelible stain on his military record, which relied heavily on family influence. Public criticism was rampant. Meanwhile, Count Rockefeller's victory at Conford had earned him immense prestige and royal favor. Eisenberg's position was increasingly perilous by comparison. He needed a credible military achievement to offset the loss of the pass and secure his status. Without it, his political enemies in the royal capital would surely move to impeach him. Even with Queen Mother Catherine as his daughter, she could not protect him indefinitely against overwhelming public and political pressure. A failure to act would lead to loss of territory, demotion, or political liquidation. These heads, especially the 300 berserker skulls, were a political lifeline for Count Eisenberg. He could easily frame these as the spoils of his own elite forces or guerrilla units from the defense of Blackstone Pass. Presenting these would transform his image from a disgraced commander to a tragic hero who inflicted heavy losses on the enemy. The political value far outweighed the gold. The price was a bargain. Blake realized his bargaining was futile against my insight and monopoly. He sighed, wiped his sweat with a silk handkerchief, and conceded, "Lord Carl, your vision is sharp. Very well. We accept your price, 50 gold per berserker, 10 gold per soldier." I relaxed, offering a genuine smile. "Excellent, Mr. Blake. A profitable deal for both of us." With the price settled, they moved to the payment method. The total for 2,300 heads came to over 20,500 gold coins, a staggering sum. Blake rubbed his hands, smiling shrewdly. "Lord Carl, we brought gold, but paying such a massive amount in cash will strain our caravan's liquidity. We also brought high-quality livestock, northern warhorses, cattle, and sheep, assets your territory desperately needs. Perhaps we can settle part of the payment in kind. Why not trade part of the payment in livestock? It may hold more value for you than mere gold." I agreed. While I needed gold for military pay and supplies, I lacked the resources to build a foundation. For the recovering Conford, living means of production, warhorses for mobility and draft horses for agriculture, were strategically superior to cold metal in a vault. These animals were essential to jump-starting the economy and boosting military strength. Agreed. Edgar will negotiate the valuation. I require healthy, fertile livestock, no inferior stock. Edgar immediately began assessing the animals with Blake's specialists. The deal was struck, 18,000 gold coins in cash, with the remainder settled in livestock. This included 20 high-quality northern warhorses, valued at 40 gold each. 30 sturdy draft horses were included for farming and transport. 50 cows, mostly fertile females, would serve as the cornerstone of Conford's agriculture. 500 sheep, primarily used for wool and breeding, were also part of the trade. I planned to use the wool for clothing and the meat/milk to improve my subjects' nutrition. Both sides were satisfied. I secured vital strategic assets, while Blake saved cash and acquired the goods. The exchange proceeded efficiently under strict supervision. Blake's men brought chests of gold, which Edgar's trusted staff verified. Simultaneously, my soldiers loaded the canvas-covered goods from the basement into Blake's wagons. The tense, orderly process concluded after a long period. Blake bowed, led his caravan out of Conford's outer city, and vanished toward the horizon. The locals suspected nothing, assuming it was a standard livestock trade. No one guessed the wagons carried political vouchers capable of shaking the royal capital. The castle vault was now filled with gold, and the pastures echoed with the sounds of new livestock. I gained my startup capital, while Count Eisenberg would soon receive the meritorious service needed to secure his status. The transaction was a success for both parties. The only victim would be the Plantagenet court, which would have to pay for this fabricated victory. Standing on the balcony, Edgar and I watched the caravan disappear. Edgar sighed. "These merchants are just middlemen. The real buyer is likely a powerful count needing meritorious service to bolster his position." Though he didn't name Eisenberg, both men understood. I smiled dismissively. No need to state the obvious. I'm grateful. Business relies on supply and demand. Without their shady needs, our blood-stained goods wouldn't fetch such a high price. This is our lifeline. Edgar chuckled, his cynicism replaced by pragmatism. My expression sharpened. Enough talk. We have funding. Now we must use it wisely. First, start the livestock farm. Edgar, you oversee this personally. Select reliable hands. Focus on breeding the cows and sheep. Wool is our future for textiles and winter clothing. The 20 warhorses go to Leon for the cavalry. The draft horses go to the fortified settlements for land reclamation. With animal power, we can clear fields faster and achieve self-sufficiency before the spring planting ends. Edgar nodded. Understood. I will present the distribution plan by sunrise. Deep within the Rockefort estate in Hoenham. Unlike the bustling, ambitious atmosphere of Conford or the political intrigue of the capital, this fief was unnaturally quiet. The region, known for its rolling hills and forests, felt stagnant. The silence was heavy, muffling all sound within the estate. Servants moved with hushed steps, fearing to disturb the peace. Hidden in an oak forest at the estate's edge stood a modest two-story stone house. Once a summer retreat, it was now overgrown with ivy. It served as Charlotte's secret refuge for her pregnancy. Only a handful of people knew of her presence. Aside from Count Rockefort, only Aunt Martha and two strictly vetted maids were aware. Even the estate steward was told only that she was indisposed and required rest. The Count's word was absolute. Charlotte's life had become mechanical and isolated. She rose early, before the mist cleared from the forest. She spent her days in the second-floor room, gazing through the arched window at the oak branches. She sat in a rocking chair, wrapped in a wool blanket. A book always rested on her lap, poetry, history, or travelogues. But her eyes remained unfocused, staring blankly at the gray sky fragmented by the trees. Sunlight struggled through the dense canopy, casting flickering spots of light on Charlotte's pale, translucent cheeks and golden hair, yet she remained indifferent. Eating became a mechanical act of survival. Martha prepared balanced, digestible meals for her. Charlotte ate quietly and slowly, showing neither pickiness nor appetite. She grew increasingly thin, her skeletal frame protruding and her cheeks sunken, making her blue eyes appear hauntingly vast and hollow. On sunny afternoons, she would ride in an unmarked, nondescript carriage, accompanied by Martha. Driven by a silent, trusted old coachman, they traveled along an overgrown path into the secluded depths of the estate's forest. There, she would walk slowly and silently along a stream, supported by Martha. She wore loose gowns and thick wool shawls to discreetly hide her advanced pregnancy. Her face remained a mask of detached calm, devoid of smiles or frowns. She accepted Martha's care and answered questions briefly, never initiating conversation or mentioning the outside world. She avoided all talk of Conford, Karl, the war, or the royal marriage decree. To Martha, who knew her best, this stagnant silence was more distressing than any outburst of grief. Martha had watched Charlotte grow from a curious girl into a brave, spirited young knight active in France City's social and military circles. She had also witnessed the girl's brutal transformation. It began with the confusion of her pregnancy, followed by the agonizing anxiety during the Battle of Carnford while she struggled to manage family affairs. When news of Karl's survival and victory arrived, Charlotte's hope had briefly reignited. Then came the imperial decree from Place City, naming Karl as Princess Louise's consort, a blow that shattered her love, dignity, and future. The vibrant Charlotte vanished, replaced by this hollow, doll-like shell. Martha knew this calm was not acceptance. It was a numbness born of despair, burying all pain, anger, and love for Karl deep within. Martha feared that touching upon these memories would shatter Charlotte's fragile state and unleash destructive emotions. She could only serve her with care, offering small comforts and silent companionship. She prayed daily for a safe delivery and for time to heal the deep wounds. Martha believed that as long as Charlotte and the child survived, it was the best they could hope for. One winter afternoon, sunlight pierced the clouds, casting warm patches on the stone floor. Charlotte sat in her usual rocking chair, wrapped in a wool blanket. A poetry book from her brother Henry lay open on her lap, ignored as the pages fluttered in the breeze. Her gaze remained fixed on the bare oak branches outside, hollow and unfocused. Knock, knock, knock. A gentle, polite knock shattered the silence. Martha froze, startled and alert. The location was secret. Only two maids ever visited, and they never lingered. Count Rockefort had strictly forbidden visitors. Charlotte turned her head toward the door, a faint flicker of emotion crossing her eyes. Martha signaled for Charlotte to stay put and approached the heavy oak door. Hearing only the wind outside, she hesitated. "Who is there?" she asked, her voice low and steady. After a pause, a familiar, weary, yet elegant voice replied, "Martha, it is I, Isabella. Lady Isabella, Charlotte's mother." Martha gasped, covering her mouth in shock. She knew the Count had sent word to the capital, where Isabella was staying with Henry. She hadn't expected her to arrive so quickly, given the long, arduous journey from the royal capital to the Huenham fief. "My lady," Martha exclaimed, quickly unlatching the heavy brass bolt. Standing outside was a middle-aged noblewoman in a travel-worn velvet gown and cloak. She looked exhausted, her hair slightly disheveled. Yet, her inherent grace and beauty remained, softened by the passage of time. It was indeed Isabella, wife of Count Rochefort. "My lady, please, come in," Martha said, stepping aside with relief. Isabella did not acknowledge Martha. Her eyes immediately locked onto the figure in the rocking chair, her daughter. Seeing Charlotte's pale, sunken face and the unmistakable swell of her pregnancy, Isabella felt a sharp, suffocating pain in her chest. The reality was far worse than her worst fears. Her eyes welled with tears. Overcome by sorrow and guilt, she rushed inside, stumbling toward her daughter. "Charlotte, my poor child." Isabella's voice trembled. She hesitated to embrace her, fearing she might startle her or harm the baby. Charlotte stared at her mother, her blue eyes wide with disbelief, as the thick, icy shell she had built around her heart finally began to crack. Charlotte stared in disbelief at the sudden appearance of Anna, the icy shell she had long maintained around her heart shattering at the sight of her mother. Charlotte stumbled as she rose from her rocking chair, ignoring her heavy belly to throw herself into her mother's familiar, travel-worn embrace like a wounded bird finding its nest. She clutched Lady Isabella's velvet cloak, desperate to shed her helplessness and fear, clinging to the only anchor that could save her from the encroaching darkness. Burying her face in her mother's shoulder, which smelled of lavender and the outdoor chill, she began to tremble violently. "Mother! Mother!" she sobbed, her voice a broken, desperate cry. "Why did you take so long? I was so scared. I'm in so much pain." She wept uncontrollably, her tears soaking through Lady Isabella's clothes, searing the mother's heart with her raw, inconsolable grief. Lady Isabella held her daughter tightly, feeling the tremors, the hot tears, and the heavy, undeniable weight of the pregnancy. Her heart shattered, but she suppressed her own tears, pouring all her strength and protective instincts into the embrace. She patted Charlotte's back with gentle, rhythmic strokes, whispering through choked sobs, "I'm sorry, my darling. I'm so sorry I arrived so late. It's all right now. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Let it all out. You don't have to be strong anymore. My poor, sweet child." Martha watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face at the sight of the mother and daughter. She wiped her eyes with her apron, but the tears flowed unabated. She knew this release was the end of Charlotte's isolation. With her mother here, the girl no longer had to face this cruelty alone. Charlotte finally had a sanctuary where she could drop her defenses and find true protection. This was the first step toward healing, a glimmer of light in the dark. Charlotte wept for a long time in her mother's arms. She seemed to be washing away months of accumulated fear, injustice, and agony. Lady Isabella held her silently, offering wordless support as she stroked her daughter's hair. The fireplace cast long, flickering shadows of the two women against the stone walls. Eventually, the racking sobs subsided into quiet hiccups, though Charlotte refused to let go. Sensing the shift, Lady Isabella gently guided her back to the rocking chair. She sat on a low stool nearby, keeping a firm, protective grip on her daughter's cold hands. With a silk handkerchief, she tenderly wiped Charlotte's tear-streaked face and brushed back her matted golden hair. "You've suffered so much," Lady Isabella murmured, her heart aching at the sight of her daughter's pale, haggard face. "I received all your father's letters. I know everything. Don't be afraid. I'm staying right here until you safely deliver this child, and you are both well again." Feeling the warmth of her mother's touch and the weight of her promise, the ice around Charlotte's heart began to thaw. She nodded weakly, a faint glimmer of hope appearing in her hollow eyes. "Thank you, Mother, for coming." "Don't thank me, silly girl," Lady Isabella said, stroking Charlotte's hair and glancing at her belly, the vessel of both her daughter's pain and the family's future. "No matter what happens or what schemes surround us, you are my most precious treasure." She placed her hand over Charlotte's, feeling the life within. "This child is a gift, the purest blood of the Rochefort line. I swear on my life, no one will harm you or my grandchild. I am here." The promise acted as a beacon of light in Charlotte's clouded mind. She was no longer alone. Leaning on her mother's shoulder, she finally found a moment of peace. Charlotte rested there, letting the last of her burdens drift away. Lady Isabella continued to soothe her, though her own heart was filled with complex, protective resentment. She felt deeply conflicted about the young man named I. Unlike Count Rochefort, Lady Isabella had remained in the royal capital, knowing little of the young lord in the Northern Territory beyond newspaper reports and the sensationalized royal marriage. She knew me only as Duke Schmidt's son, a minor lord who rose to prominence as a prince consort after lucking into a victory against the Solonians. Yet, I was the very man who had caused her daughter such immense suffering. As a mother, she felt an instinctive, burning hatred for the man who had failed her child. Still, she had to keep these feelings hidden for Charlotte's sake. After a moment, Lady Isabella retrieved a wax-sealed letter from her embroidered pouch. The paper was worn, bearing the marks of a long journey. "Charlotte," she said gently, "your father asked me to give this to you. It's about me." Charlotte stiffened at the name. She pulled away from her mother's shoulder, her eyes flashing with urgency as she snatched the letter. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the seal, then hesitated. She glanced around with instinctive wariness, treating the letter like a secret treasure she dared not let others see. Lady Isabella watched with a pang of sorrow. "Let's go to the study," she said softly. "It's quiet there. I'll go with you." Charlotte nodded gratefully. Supported by her mother, she carried the heavy letter toward the small study. Aunt Martha remained in the living room, watching them with worried, hopeful eyes as the study door closed. Charlotte leaned against the door to steady herself before opening the letter by the fading window light. Her eyes fell on the opening line, "My dear daughter, Charlotte." It was her father's voice, not mine. A wave of crushing disappointment washed over her. She had hoped for a word from me, but she forced herself to suppress the ache and focus on her father's words. The Count's handwriting was steady, yet the lines betrayed a rare, profound sense of paternal concern and helplessness. "Regarding me, there is something you should know. I visited him shortly after you left France City." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat, her fingers tightening around the letter as if she could see the scene through the ink. She held her breath and read on. The royal envoy had just finished discussing the princess's northern procession and was preparing to head to Confort to deliver the definitive imperial decree. Unexpectedly, I arrived myself. I looked relaxed, even cheerful, holding a letter, likely one you wrote. I was clearly looking forward to reuniting with you. Charlotte's breath hitched. A sharp, lingering pain pierced her heart. She imagined me arriving full of hope, unaware that my world was about to shatter. The cruelty of falling from such anticipation into despair was a pain she knew all too well. She forced herself to continue. I read the decree to him. When I heard I was to be named Prince Consort and wed Princess Louise, my face drained of color. I stood frozen, as if asking if I were joking. Only after a long silence did I tremble and ask if I could refuse. Tears fell onto the letter, blurring the ink as Charlotte felt my helplessness. The answer was cruel. I could not defy the royal order. I then desperately asked to see you, but I had to tell him you had already left for the Huanum fief. When I heard that, the light in my eyes vanished. I likely thought you left because you were angry or unwilling to see me. That's not true. I love you. Charlotte sobbed silently. She longed to fly to me and explain her heart. I couldn't bear his expression, so I told him the truth. You left not out of anger, but because you loved him too much to watch him marry another. Even when I asked if she wanted to see you one last time, she refused, fearing it would jeopardize your future. I was silent for a long time. I understood your sacrifice. I was devastated, yet deeply moved by your devotion. I urged him to stay strong, reminding him that the people of Confort depended on him. I am a resilient boy and eventually pulled myself together. We discussed recruiting refugees and rebuilding the fief. I soon regained my focus. The final lines brought a bitter warmth. Before leaving, I asked me to convey my vow. Tell Charlotte I will never betray her. I love her with all my heart, and that will never change. I promise that this marriage is merely a temporary measure forced by royal pressure, and that my heart remains loyal to you. I have relayed his feelings, the Count wrote. As for your pregnancy, I have respected your wishes and kept it from him. The choice of how to proceed is yours, but remember, your parents are always your foundation. Charlotte lowered the letter, feeling drained yet strangely light. Her face, previously numb, now glowed with a brightness like the sky after a storm. She pressed the letter to her chest, feeling as if she were holding my heartbeat. Grief, longing, and worry were now tempered by the stubborn hope of my vow. A wave of relief washed away the gloom that had plagued her for days. She stifled a sob, her tears now those of joy. Her endurance had been rewarded. She hadn't loved the wrong man. I was worth the wait. She carefully folded the letter and tucked it away like a treasure. She stood, smoothed her dress, and opened the study door. Lady Isabella and Aunt Martha were waiting outside and looked stunned. Charlotte's eyes were still red, but her gaze was clear, and a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. She seemed like a different person, radiating ease and hope. "Charlotte," Lady Isabella asked, surprised and hopeful, "why do you look so happy?" Charlotte leaned on her mother's shoulder, her voice light. "I'm fine, Mother. Truly. I just learned something that cleared my heart." She didn't reveal the contents, but Isabella seemed to understand. Perhaps the young man named Carl wasn't as unworthy as she had thought. Her daughter's happiness was all that mattered. "Good, good," Isabella hugged her. "You must be hungry. Martha has dinner ready." The atmosphere at dinner was light. Charlotte ate with a renewed appetite. She no longer ate out of mere obligation. Aunt Martha smiled, urging her to eat more for the baby's sake. Outside, the night in Huenham was peaceful. Inside, the fire of hope had been rekindled in Charlotte's heart. She knew she wasn't fighting alone. In the northern frontier, someone was working toward their future with the same conviction. That was enough. 3 days later, a massive caravan appeared on the road to Confort. The endless line of wagons was piled high with goods covered in heavy canvas. Flanking them were disciplined, well-armored knights whose presence signaled the authority of a high noble. The shanty town was stirred. Refugees gathered to watch, whispering in curiosity. "Look at those knights. This isn't a merchant caravan," they murmured, speculating if the princess had arrived early. The knight's cold, imposing presence kept the crowd at a respectful distance. From the castle tower, I and Edgar had already been alerted by scouts. It wasn't the princess. The timing and the nature of the escort were entirely different. Seeing the banners of the Franklin territory and Duke Schmidt, I immediately recognized the convoy. Edgar exclaimed joyfully, noting the convoy's unprecedented size and suggesting that my northern frontier achievements and engagement to the princess had elevated the family's status in the capital. Ignoring the remark, I headed down the mountain, ordering Edgar to clear the refugees and maintain order. I wanted to hide the chaotic shantytown from Lady Irene, knowing it was an eyesore despite being a necessary stage of development. The soldiers cleared the path as the crowd dispersed. The massive convoy halted before the castle, with knights fanning out to secure the perimeter. The door of the most ornate carriage, drawn by 4 white horses, opened. A maid stepped out first, turning to assist someone. A gloved, well-cared-for hand rested on the maid's arm. A noblewoman in a deep blue travel cloak stepped down with grace. Despite her travel-worn appearance, her noble bearing stood in stark contrast to the harsh northern frontier. She adjusted her hair, her gaze locking onto the young man at the castle gate with a mix of urgency, worry, and excitement. I felt my heart tighten instantly. A surge of warmth, rooted in deep-seated memories and emotions, flooded my body. Instinctively, I knew this woman was my mother, Irene. I stood frozen, meeting her tear-filled, familiar green eyes, unable to find the words to speak. Irene gazed at her son, noting his maturity and thinness, her lips trembling as she struggled to speak. After a moment of silence, I stepped forward to meet her. Irene quickened her pace toward me. A few steps away, she rushed into my arms, embracing my neck tightly. I stiffened briefly before relaxing and returning the embrace firmly. I felt her trembling and smelled the familiar scent of spices and travel dust on her hair. The bond of blood bridged the gap of time and status. Irene buried her face in my shoulder, savoring my presence as if to etch the moment into her memory. Finally, she pulled back, cupping my face with trembling hands to inspect me. With teary eyes, she choked out, "My child, you've changed. You're so thin and tanned. You must have suffered so much here." I held her cold hands, feeling her deep concern. I shook my head and offered a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, Mother. It's busy here, but I'm happy and fulfilled." I omitted the brutal realities of war to put her at ease. Seeing her thin cloak, I urged her to head inside the castle to rest. I took her arm and turned toward the castle. I instructed Edgar to handle the supplies, inventory them, and ensure the guards and staff were well accommodated. Edgar bowed deeply, welcoming Lady Irene with genuine warmth and respect. He was glad I had family here to help alleviate the pressure of my political burdens. Irene acknowledged Edgar with a nod, though she kept a firm grip on my hand. Accompanied by knights, they began the walk to the castle. The path led through the sprawling shantytown. Despite Edgar's efforts to organize the area, the reality of tens of thousands of refugees was still overwhelming. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and livestock, and the path was lined with makeshift shacks. Gaunt refugees watched the ornate procession with a mix of awe and numbness. Irene clung to her son, shocked by the harsh, chaotic conditions. It was a world away from the order of the Franklin territory or the capital. She observed children playing in the mud and adults preparing for work. Despite the environment, she sensed a strange, resilient vitality among the people. Touched by the struggle and the life force of the land, she gripped my hand tighter. Guided by me, Irene ascended the corridor toward the castle. The stone walls still bore scars of battle, deep gouges and dark stains from the fighting. A faint scent of gunpowder and rust seemed to linger. Irene gripped my arm, asking with concern, "It must have been dangerous here, right?" I laughed lightly, patting her hand. "Don't worry, Mother. We had some tough fights, but we're safe now. This corridor was part of our trap. We taught the Solonians a harsh lesson right here." My confidence eased her, though her eyes remained filled with pity. Reaching the summit, they faced the castle's outer wall. A section of the wall had been rebuilt, its stones standing out against the old masonry. I explained that the wall had been damaged by Solonian catapults, but was now stronger than ever, leading her inside. Inside the inner city, the atmosphere shifted. The cramped, semi-subterranean slave dwellings had been cleared, opening up the space significantly. Rows of wooden and stone huts stood along the inner wall, housing servants and soldiers. The open space served as a tidy training ground, far cleaner than the shantytown below. Seeing this, Lady Irene finally relaxed and let out a soft sigh. I led Lady Irene into the heart of Carnford Castle, the main keep. Despite her preparation, the sight of the scarred Lord's Hall made her heart tighten. The walls bore jagged, centipede-like cracks, crudely patched with stone and mortar. The ceiling was pockmarked with damage, temporarily sealed with thick wooden planks. Dark, suspicious stains remained in the crevices of the floorboards despite repeated scrubbing. The hall still carried a faint, lingering scent of gunpowder, blood, and mold. Lady Irene traced a cold, rough patch on the wall with her gloved hand, her voice trembling. These scars, they were from the fighting?" I stood beside her, my gaze calm as I looked upon the remnants of history. "Yes, Mother," I replied steadily. "Mostly from Solonian cannons. One shell nearly breached this load-bearing wall. If it had collapsed, the keep would have been lost." Hearing my calm account of the near-death experience, Lady Irene turned and gripped my hand tightly. Her hands were ice-cold, her eyes filled with heartache. "My child, you were in such danger. I was heartbroken in the south, worrying for you day and night." Feeling her profound maternal love, a warmth surged through me. I squeezed her hand back, offering a reassuring smile. "It's over, Mother. Look, I'm standing right here. We held the castle and survived. These scars are just medals of honor for Carnford and our growth." I looked around, my tone firm. "I believe we will soon make this place even stronger and warmer than before." Seeing his resolve, Lady Irene's fear gave way to pride and relief that her son had become a true lord. She nodded, holding my hand tighter. Looking at the dilapidated hall, Lady Irene sighed. "I know times are hard, but you must make basic repairs. You are to marry a princess soon. This will be your bridal chamber and a place to host royalty. If they see the future prince consort's home in this state, it will be a disgrace to the royal family." The mention of the wedding and princess stirred my irritation. I couldn't explain my feelings for Charlotte or the political trap of this marriage, but I respected my mother's concerns. I took a breath, guided her to a high-backed chair, and sat beside her. "Mother, I understand, but you've seen the thousands of refugees at the foot of the mountain. They are the foundation of Carnford. I am their lord first, and a husband second. My duty is to ensure they survive and have proper housing. I won't waste limited funds on vanity projects for a princess I haven't even met. That is a lord's basic responsibility. Lady Irene was stunned, then looked at me with immense pride. My good child, I understand. You put your subjects first. I am so proud of your kindness. Her expression turned serious, but the wedding cannot be ignored. It concerns not just Carnford's face, but the reputation of Duke Schmidt. She looked at my confused expression. Your father values you highly now. Your victories in the northern frontier are known throughout the kingdom. He considers you one of his most important heirs. Your actions now reflect on the entire Schmidt family. If the wedding is too humble, the royal family will think we are slighting them. Your father would be humiliated. In noble circles, face often matters more than substance. I was surprised that my father valued me so much. Though I felt no affection for the cold duke, I knew gaining his support was vital for Carnford's future. Ruining their fragile relationship over a wedding would be unwise. I realized I couldn't be too careless. The surface appearance had to be maintained. Seeing me waver, she pressed on. Don't worry about supplies. The family caravan brought grain, wool, and gold. These are for you to rebuild the keep and the refugees' homes, so you can welcome the princess with dignity. With the arrival of these materials, my resistance faded. These supplies turned the repairs from a vanity project into a practical upgrade for defense and living conditions. I nodded. Very well, mother. I will make the necessary repairs so the family is not shamed. I added silently. And to secure more support from my father, Lady Irene smiled with relief. She believed the family's wealth would help her son pass this hurdle. She was also grateful for the chance to make up for lost time and witness his milestone. She touched my hair affectionately. That's my good boy. The warmth of her touch eased the tension caused by the political marriage. I leaned into her touch, offering a rare, dependent smile. You must be tired, mother. Let me take you to your room, though it is quite humble. She shook her head, holding my arm. Silly child, as long as I am with you, anywhere is fine. I helped her up the stairs. The second floor was even more damaged, having taken the brunt of the bombardment. The walls were covered in mismatched patches, silent witnesses to the intensity of the battle. Seeing the scars, Lady Irene gripped my arm tightly in pain. I comforted my mother, Anna, assuring her that I was rarely in the castle during dangerous moments and that the structure had been empty when hit. Anna felt a slight relief, though her concern remained evident. I led her to my bedroom, which was spacious yet sparsely furnished. The room contained only a large wooden bed, a desk cluttered with maps and files, a heavy wardrobe, and a bookshelf holding a few military treatises and rough paper war novels. A fireplace burned, barely keeping the northern chill at bay. Anna scanned the room, her brow furrowing slightly. It was far too austere, lacking any signs of a young man's life or a lord's status. Acting as a concerned mother, she walked to the bed and checked the bedding. Is this warm enough for winter? She asked softly. I watched her, feeling a mix of warmth and helplessness. It's warm enough, mother. The fire is always lit. Anna nodded but continued her inspection. She opened the wardrobe, fretting about the northern cold, and checked the thickness of my clothes. I placed a hand on her shoulder. Don't worry, mother. I'm used to the climate, and we have plenty of firewood. I steered her toward the door. Let's go to your room. It has a great view of the valley. You must be tired from the journey. The supply caravan Anna brought far exceeded my expectations. Edgar's inventory report left me pleasantly surprised. Most notably, there were 10,000 gold coins, a massive sum for any frontier lord. The shipment also included 300 chainmail suits, 100 heavy breastplates, 300 new matchlock muskets, and 5,000 lead bullets. While gunpowder was omitted for safety, the core weaponry needs were met. Gunpowder could be sourced locally, significantly boosting the Carnford garrison's firepower. There were also enough melee weapons and shields to arm a 1,000-man legion. Essential production tools arrived as well: plows, hoes, picks, and heavy horse yokes. These were vital for Carnford's land reclamation, which had been hampered by tool shortages. The shipment also included seeds, 50,000 caddies of rye, 5,000 caddies of peas, and 1,000 caddies of smoked meat. This secured their spring planting and bolstered food reserves. Also included were textiles, silk, and various artisan tools. Most strategically, my father had responded to my specific request. 3 precision heavy drilling machines for manufacturing musket barrels were included, a key step toward military self-sufficiency. This showed my father took my request seriously, offering visionary support. My opinion of my stern father improved. The shipment also contained silver tableware and tapestries. These were clearly for the upcoming royal wedding to maintain the Duke's son image. I cared little for these, but understood my mother's intent to make the castle feel less like a barracks. I summoned Edgar to organize the distribution. Edgar, categorize and register everything, then distribute as needed. Store the weapons and armor in the reinforced armory under guard. Halt expansion. Focus on consolidating current troops. Food and seeds are the priority. Store them securely. You hold the keys and must track every grain. Distribute the tools to the reclamation teams, but require signatures for every item. Enforce strict maintenance. Hold teams accountable for damage or loss. Give the drilling machines to Hector. Have him select the best craftsmen to form a military workshop and master the equipment. Edgar immediately set to work. I then addressed the face-saving renovations for the shanty town and castle. With my total funds now reaching nearly 50,000 gold coins, money was no longer the issue. The challenge was finding skilled labor and leadership. Moore, the Minister of Livelihood, was the only one capable. However, Moore was occupied with the critical construction of the first Tunbeo. I summoned Moore, who arrived covered in mud but focused. Moore, we have the funds, and the princess is coming. We must renovate the shanty town and castle. I know you are busy with the Tunbeo, but this is urgent. Moore smiled calmly. Don't worry, Lord. Edgar already briefed me. Thanks to your Ministry of Organization exams, my apprentices have passed and been promoted to manage the Tunbeo construction. They are learning fast and have the Tunbeo project on track. Moore assured me. I can oversee the renovations while letting the apprentices handle the daily Tunbeo operations. It's a great training opportunity for them and won't impact our progress. I felt relieved and pleased by the efficiency of my new system. Excellent. You have full authority over the renovations. Keep costs low. Just make it look presentable. Understood, Lord. I will draft a plan that balances utility and appearance for the princess's arrival. Maul, acting with professional efficiency, realized he couldn't overhaul the entire shantytown in time. He focused solely on the princess's ceremonial route and the surrounding visual impact. He surveyed and marked a 1-kilometer core route from the Fran City Road to the foot of Carnford Castle. This path ran directly through the most densely packed and chaotic sections of the shantytown. Despite Edgar's previous road planning, the spring mud and heavy traffic left the area filthy and the dilapidated shacks fully exposed. The princess cannot see this, Maul told me. We only need to clean up other areas briefly, but this route requires a total transformation. I felt a strange sense of déjà vu, reminded of image projects from my past life meant to impress visiting superiors. I wryly accepted my role as a promoter of such superficiality. Reality left me no choice. Maul's plan was swift and uncompromising. He restricted all non-essential traffic on the 1-kilometer main road until the princess's arrival. He mobilized 800 laborers to cut timber and build fences, physically shielding the road from the site of the shacks. While the restricted access caused complaints among residents forced to take long detours, it was necessary. For the sake of the political mission, the subjects had to endure temporary hardship. Maul also organized drainage ditches and used gravel from the riverbank to pave the muddy road, significantly improving its condition. For the most unsightly shacks, Maul ordered Elliot and his apprentices, along with 500 refugees, to perform a rapid facade renovation. They reinforced walls with rough boards and draped vines and grass over cracks to create a rustic, pastoral illusion. With my approval, Maul used Lady Irene's plain fabrics to hang strips of cloth over doorways and fences. The fluttering fabric gave the area the appearance of a quiet village rather than a refugee camp. Meanwhile, Edgar tasked the new Culture and Propaganda Department with managing public sentiment. Tommy and his team entered the shanty town to explain the changes and soothe the frustrated residents. Fellows, bear with us. The Lord does this for the honor of Carnford and for your own benefit. If the princess sees us in ruins, she might think the Lord is incompetent and withhold aid. The Lord is using this opportunity to fix roads, drainage, and your homes. This is a real blessing. Remember the Lord's kindness. This temporary inconvenience leads to a better future. Through this propaganda, they reframed a forced political task as a benevolent act of care to quell dissent. Under Maul's supervision, the 1-kilometer welcoming route was transformed with surprising speed. Though superficial, the project was sufficient to protect the dignity of Conford and the Schmidt family. With the FACE project in Maul's hands, I refocused on the fundamental survival and development of Conford. Political appearances were temporary. Military strength and territorial stability were the true foundations. With funds available, the reconstruction and expansion of the army could finally begin. The first step was not recruitment, but properly settling the veterans who had bled for Conford. After the siege, fewer than 200 veterans remained fit for active duty. Over 100 others were disabled and could no longer fight, having paid a heavy price for their home. Settling these men was a matter of both humanity and morale for future recruits. I, Edgar, and Brendan devised a detailed, compassionate resettlement plan. The core principles were centralized housing, neighborhood support, and dignity. Eligible disabled veterans and their families would receive priority housing in the southeast corner of Fort No. 1. 30 stone-and-wood homes were allocated to ensure these families had warm, secure shelter. A 10-to-1 support policy was implemented, where 10 refugee families would assist one veteran family. They would help with heavy labor like farming, home repairs, and snow clearing. This system solved the veterans' difficulties while fostering integration and a sense of community. Edgar had already established literacy classes for soldiers in the forts. I decided to extend this to the veterans' children and the hundreds of idle children in the shantytown. I proposed setting up simple literacy points in the shantytown to Edgar. They don't need to be formal schools. We lack the resources. We can be flexible. Use empty shacks, sheltered eaves, or cleared ground in the refugee areas. Find literate refugees, penniless scholars, accountants, fallen nobles, or retired veterans to act as teachers. They only need an hour or two a day, using charcoal and wooden boards as tools. Teach them basic reading, writing, and simple accounting using everyday vocabulary. This is more than education. It is an opportunity for ideological guidance. Teach them who provided food and shelter when they were displaced. Teach them that Conford, Lord Carl, and their own fathers built this order together. Early education shapes a lifetime. If these children are guided correctly, they will understand their place here. If they develop a sense of belonging, they could become the pillars of Conford in 10 or 20 years. Even if they don't become leaders, they will become law-abiding, productive subjects. Even just teaching them to write their own names and recognize Conford is a massive success. The cost is minimal, but the effect on social stability and public morale is far greater than mere food aid. Edgar praised the plan. Brilliant, my lord. I will identify pilot sites among the refugee camps immediately. Education will give the children a future and allow their parents to work with peace of mind. After addressing the wounded and education, I turned to the most fundamental issue, land distribution. This was essential for economic recovery and fulfilling my promise to stabilize my rule. Looking at the newly plowed fields, I told Edgar, the refugee reclamation teams have made great progress. It is time to fulfill our promise and begin large-scale land distribution. Edgar nodded, agreed. The new land is fertile and ready for spring planting. This will reassure the subjects and boost productivity. I issued clear instructions. The distribution must be fair but reward merit. First, allocate the best prepared land to our earliest, most loyal subjects. 10 acres per household as a baseline. Second, grant extra land, 15 to 20 acres, to families of the fallen, disabled veterans, and those who contributed significantly to our defense and construction efforts. I paused, considering the refugees. We lack jobs for the new arrivals, and we cannot feed them indefinitely. Assign them uncultivated land. Give each household 5 acres to start. I emphasized incentives. Create a system to reward those with high work points or exceptional contributions with extra land. Everyone must see that hard work yields tangible rewards. Finally, the Lord's Manor will continue providing rations to all recipients until the autumn harvest, after which they must become self-sufficient. Edgar calculated, a solid plan. With 4-field crop rotation, 10 acres should yield 500 to 700 kilograms of rye by autumn. He proposed a tax. At our 1/5 rate, we collect 100 to 150 kilograms per 10 acres. A family will retain 300 to 400 kilograms, enough to survive with a small surplus. As promised, fallen and wounded families will be tax-exempt for 3 years. I agreed. While 1/5 was not light, it was better than the kingdom standard. Conford needed high taxes to fund the military for now, but I would reduce them once the Solonian threat subsided. I approved. Proceed. Ensure the 3-year exemption is strictly enforced, so everyone knows those who bled for Conford are honored. I urged fairness and the swift issuance of land deeds. Edgar left, energized to begin. I turned to Brendan, the military commander, with an apologetic smile. My apologies for the wait, Brendan. Brendan stood straight. No apology needed, my lord. Civil affairs are the priority. I moved to the map table. With civil affairs funded, our military expansion must accelerate. How is the screening of refugees for potential recruits progressing? Brendan handed over a report. The results are unexpectedly good. I reviewed the document. Brendan explained, we are focusing on 2 groups. The highest quality are the scattered veterans from the fallen Northern Territory. They know the terrain and Solonian tactics. Many have lost everything and harbor a deep desire for revenge. Hearing of our victory, they flocked here to join us. I nodded. Excellent. Their combat will is strong. With discipline, they will become our backbone. Brendan agreed. Exactly. Because they are used to irregular warfare, I have integrated them into existing squads led by our veterans. We are using our military code and combat drills to forge their rage into disciplined strength. My eye stopped on a name, Franz. I recalled Tommy recommending this formidable, silent veteran. Franz. I remember Tommy mentioning him. Brendan confirmed. He is exceptional in scouting and combat. I've placed him in Roland's 2nd company. I set the report down. Good. Now, we begin mass recruitment for the main legion. Listen well, Brendan. Quality over quantity. Select only the strong, healthy, and obedient. We don't need to pad our numbers. I want an iron army capable of winning battles. Brendan saluted. Understood. I will establish strict standards and begin immediately. I waved him off, and Brendan departed. As the door closed, exhaustion washed over me. I sat alone in the hall, resting my head on my arms. The weight of my responsibilities pressed heavily upon me. Suddenly, soft hands gently massaged my tense shoulders. The touch was amateurish but filled with maternal affection. A familiar scent, a mix of herbs and sunlight, filled the air. I didn't need to look. I knew it was my mother, Lady Irene. A deep sense of peace allowed me to relax. I realized I didn't need to act like a son. My instincts accepted this comfort naturally. My child, Lady Irene whispered. I watched you work earlier. You have grown into such a steady, responsible lord. Her voice turned tender. But please, don't work yourself to death. It breaks my heart. I looked up and took my mother's hand as she massaged my shoulders. Her palms were warm, contrasting with my own hands, which were chilled from hours of handling cold documents and maps. The temperature difference stirred a sense of warmth within me.